The story begins at the Draconic Castle, where countless wyverns and dragons soared through the sky around the fortress. At that moment, the hero Vermouth and his 4 companions were in Devilldom, on a mission to subjugate the Demon King. They had already defeated 3 of the 5 Demon Kings, leaving only 2 remaining, but now they were being blocked by a horde of wyverns, gargoyles, and demons. The first to charge forward was Vermouth himself, the great hero, who easily wiped out all the enemies in his path. Then the mage declared that this was nothing and used all 4 elements at once to attack. This was the wise Sienna, powerful and imposing. Supporting the team, a sister of the church fought bravely, even when attacked from behind by a demon. She defended herself with mastery, demonstrating faith and resilience. This was the faithful Anise. Next came the warrior wielding a giant axe, taking down every flying creature with a single swing, smiling as the rain of blood fell from the sky. This was Maulon, the courageous. Finally, the last member arrived, late as always. He complained to Vermouth, yelling at the bastard not to charge ahead without him, then threw himself into the middle of the enemies, mowing them down with sheer brutality. This was Hamill, the idiot. Even with that nickname, he did a good job. It's explained that Hamill had always been jealous of Vermouth, seeing him as a rival, although no one else knew that. It was a one-sided rivalry. After all the demons were defeated, Hamill commented that there weren't many enemies showing up, but before he could continue, he sensed a surprise attack. He tried to warn Vermouth, but it was too late. Hamill threw himself in front of the strike and was pierced in the chest by an elite demon. As Hamill fell, bleeding, the demon tried to strike Vermouth, who dodged and used the opening to cut it in half. Everyone rushed to help Hamill, and Vermouth told him he didn't have to do that. But in his final moments, Hamill said that at least he would have an honorable death. He regretted not being honest with his companions and asked Vermouth to defeat all the Demon Kings. Vermouth swore, in the name of his title as a hero, that he would. Hamill asked Anise to pray for him, Mullen to keep being brave, and to Sienna. He confessed that he had always loved her. At that moment, the person reading the story complained, saying it was garbage. He said he couldn't believe Hamill would say something that stupid. No matter how many times he reread that crap, it always made him mad. He wondered who the heartless bastard was who wrote such a terrible story and said that if the author weren't anonymous, he'd go find them and beat them up. A child then asked a question. He wanted to know why everyone was called the Great, the Wise, the Faithful, the Courageous, but he was the stupid one, always the stupid one. What a surprise. He was sure the person who wrote it was someone he beat up 300 years ago. He didn't understand why the other heroes allowed a book like that to be published. Didn't any of them think to protect their comrades' honor? Still, he couldn't really blame them. No one would imagine he would be reborn with memories of his past life. Hamill had died 300 years ago during the subjugation of the Demon Kings, and now he had been reincarnated as a descendant of the hero Vermouth. His new name was Eugene Lionheart, a 13-year-old boy. It's explained that in his past life, Vermouth had many lovers besides his official wife. Eugene believed that would change over time, but he was wrong. The lineage recognized as direct descent came only from the main wife. Even though they shared the same surname, Eugene was part of a collateral family. Before the bloodline succession ceremony, collateral members weren't allowed to use real swords or train mana. That's why Eugene only used a wooden sword, but he believed that would change that day. He struck a training dummy, cutting it in half even with a wooden sword. His father, watching, was shocked. His father remarked that he had broken the dummy again. Looking at Eugene's body, he wondered if that was really the body of a 13-year-old boy. He thought he would even lose badly in a fight against his own son. He knew that was his boy, but sometimes it scared him. It was a body that didn't fit that of a child, with a piercing gaze devoid of any childish innocence. Even after losing his mother at a young age, Eugene never once complained. Eugene, on the other hand, said the dummy broke because the blacksmith was useless. He said the guy only made junk, and they should bring him there to teach him a lesson. He also added that his father was too soft-hearted. Eugene's father said he would talk to him and explained that the bloodline succession ceremony would take place the next day. It was a tradition held every 10 years in the Lionheart family, gathering all children between the ages of 10 and 15 at the main house. Both the direct and collateral bloodlines participated, competing to see who was worthy of being called a Lionheart. However, unlike the collateral families, the children of the direct bloodline were allowed to use real swords and also develop their own mana. Eugene thought that, in the end, it was just a way to prevent the collateral branches from usurping the main lineage, keeping everyone else beneath them. His father, observing the boy's talent, wondered if he was really his blood son. He thought that if Eugene had been born into the direct line, maybe he wouldn't have to face this disparity between his talent and the reality around him, since he himself, as a father, had no talent at all. Eugene asked if his father was okay, and he replied yes, that it was nothing. But Eugene realized he was probably blaming himself for not being as talented as his his son. After that, Eugene's father approached and asked him not to try to compete with the children of the direct bloodline, saying that no matter how talented he was, he still wouldn't be able to face those kids. They trained mana, had been fighting from an early age, and could use any weapons they wanted. Eugene replied that he wouldn't compete, that he was calm, but deep down he thought the opposite. Of course he was going to participate. After all, it was a competition against 10-year-old brats. So easy it might even make him sleepy. As he walked toward the next training dummy, he thought about the participants in that ceremony. There would be 3 from the direct bloodline and 6 from the collateral. One of the 3 from the direct line was the son of the first wife, and the other 2 were twins from the second. Among the collateral members, 2 had greater authority than the others. Breaking yet another training dummy, Eugene reflected that he wanted to see how strong the descendants of Vermouth really were. Later inside the carriage, he thought about his past life as Hamill. Since a very young age, he always considered himself a genius. He had no trouble learning, and his growth rate was far greater than that of others. Even so, Vermouth used to call him pathetic, saying he could have become even stronger if only he had tried harder. Hamill would get furious about that. He thought it was unfair because he was giving it his all. Just because Vermouth was a genius didn't mean everyone else could be like him. In truth, Hamill knew he wasn't a real genius. There were others who truly were born gifted, skilled both with the sword and with magic. Vermouth, the great hero, was called the God of War, master of all. He had once been a duke of the Kiel Empire, but gave up the title and was praised as a hero until his death. Eugene also thought about the other companions. The wise Sienna had been invited to the magical kingdom of Aroth and became the chief mage of the magic tower. The faithful Anise, even with a heart as dirty as hers, was called a saint by the Holy Empire of Euros, and to this day there are scriptures with her teachings. The courageous Molan unbelievably founded his own kingdom. In the end, all of them had lived good lives. But then he questioned why the Demon King was still alive. They had clearly promised to defeat all the Demon Kings, yet Eugene believed Vermouth had not fulfilled his promise. The king had died in the Castle of Confinement, and it was there that Vermouth made a deal with him. After his death, the war ended. The world entered an era of peace, and that peace lasted until now, 300 years later. At that moment, another man in the carriage commented that Eugene seemed nervous. He said that if he was already like this now, he would have trouble living in the main house. Eugene thanked Mr. Gordon for the warning. Gordon informed him that from that point on, they were entering the private property of the Lionheart family. He also warned that it would still take some time to reach the main family mansion, as the path was quite long. Eugene wondered why Gordon was so proud when that land wasn't even his, but he remarked that it was a bit inconvenient for the property to be so large. Gordon explained that teleportation portals had been installed at various points, making transportation easy. Ginny just didn't use them because he didn't have permission yet. Later, Eugene arrived at the main Lionheart estate, where his journey would finally begin. He thought that of course there should be a welcoming ceremony, but when he arrived, there was no one there, only some flags and workers like janitors and the gardener. At the center stood the flag of the elder Vermouth Eugene Lionheart, a symbol only direct descendants could bear on their chest. Eugene asked if the other relatives hadn't arrived yet, and Gordon said he was the first to show up. Then he guided him to the guest house. Even though it was a secondary residence, it was elegant, refined, and comfortable. There, the maid Nina introduced herself and informed him that she would serve Eugene during his entire stay. She handed him a small bell he could ring if he needed anything. Eugene thought that at least they had given him a servant, and asked the girl's age because she looked quite young. Nina replied that she was 16 and had recently completed her training. He figured that, since they assigned a newly trained maid to serve him, maybe they were planning to punish him if she made any mistakes. He thought they were really trying to make his life difficult. He asked if she knew when the main family would arrive, and Nina said that at most, in 4 days, everyone would be there. When Eugene asked to visit the training area, Nina was surprised he already wanted to go there. Later, other youths started talking about him. One of them asked who the new boy was, and the girl answered that his name was Eugene, someone their age. The boy commented that he had heard Eugene was a bumpkin from the west of the Empire who probably knew how to handle a hoe better than a sword. They also said his carriage had caused trouble, and even though he was family, he should pay for ruining the property. The girl agreed, saying he needed to be punished, but the other replied that it wouldn't be a punishment, just a friendly warning. Meanwhile, someone else was watching the conversation from afar. When the girl looked at him, the boy got so scared that he covered the window out of fear. Eugene, at that moment, was with Nina in the training area. He was no longer using a wooden sword, but a real spear. He thought that he had never slacked off in his training, not in this life nor the previous one. Since he reincarnated, he had been pushing his body to the limit without stopping. No matter how heavy the training was, his body endured it with no problem. Even minor injuries healed quickly. This was was the body of a descendant of Vermouth, truly extraordinary. He delivered strikes and thrusts with the spear very quickly and precisely, with enough strength to impress. Nina, upon seeing this, was astonished. She thought that boy was incredible, for he moved the spear with agility even while carrying weights on his arms. Then the two little siblings showed up. They asked what Eugene was doing there. Nina, surprised, asked why Cyan and Ciel were in that place. Cyan replied that he was the one asking questions and demanded to know what that boy was doing there. Eugene responded by asking if he couldn't see that he was training. Ciel teased her brother, saying he had just been called an idiot, and asked if he was going to let that slide. Cyan, irritated, told Eugene to apologize. Eugene replied with a "fine, my bad," and turned away again. The boy complained that it wasn't sincere and demanded that Eugene bow his head and be polite. Eugene refused, saying that they were the same age, so there was no reason to bow to one another. He said that, in fact, they should be friends. Cyan became even more enraged, saying he would never be friends with someone like him, and that just being part of the family didn't make him their equal. Ciel then reminded her brother to mention the carriage. Cyan said that Eugene's carriage must have stunk everything up with the smell of manure. Eugene remained silent for a moment and asked Nina if she was his servant during his stay. She confirmed, so he told her to go clean the carriage. Nina got very nervous with that order. Cyan protested, saying Eugene should clean it himself, and even asked why he was commanding a maid in front of him, demanding to know if he was being ignored. He introduced himself as Cyan Lionheart, and Eugene also introduced himself, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. Shortly after, Ciel also introduced herself. Cyan said he didn't want to get along with Eugene since he had ignored his order. Then he saw a wooden sword on the ground, picked it up, and declared a challenge to a duel. Eugene merely observed his attitude while Ciel said that one shouldn't talk about duels so lightly, and asked Cyan to stop bothering him and go away. But Cyan provoked further, asking if Eugene was scared. He said that if he was, he should just bow his head and apologize. Eugene said he wasn't scared and didn't want to duel or apologize either. Cyan insisted, asking if he only knew how to run away and if his parents had never taught him about honor. At that moment, Eugene removed the weights he had been wearing on his arms and said fine, they could duel. Besides the weights on his arms, he took off the heavy chainmail he had been wearing under his clothes. Cyan was surprised to realize that the boy had been training the entire time with all that weight, thinking it was just part of his uniform. Eugene also removed the weight from the tip of his spear. Cyan thought that he had been the one to challenge the boy, and if he backed down, Ciel would mock him for the rest of his life. To reclaim his honor, he needed to teach Eugene a lesson, so he threw his handkerchief to the ground, formalizing the challenge. As soon as Eugene finished removing the spear's weight, he accepted. In the next second, the spear was already buried in Cyan's stomach, and he didn't even have time to react. He fell to the ground completely defeated, and Eugene declared his victory. Ciel ran to check if her brother was okay, but he threw up as soon as she got close. Then Ciel turned to Eugene and said it was unfair, that the duel had no dignity. Eugene replied that the duel began the moment Cyan threw the handkerchief and that it was his own fault for lowering his guard. Ciel admitted that maybe that was true, but said that he had clearly trained mana, even though he was from a collateral bloodline. Eugene denied it, explaining that collateral members were not allowed to train mana before the direct bloodline. Ciel accused him of lying, saying he could never have used that attack without mana. She commented that the strike was so fast that even with a guard up, Cyan wouldn't have been able to react. Eugene said she had sharp eyes, and that they weren't just for show. Ciel complained that he was very rude, and Eugene replied that he heard that often. Still, he acknowledged that her brother didn't fall without doing anything. At the moment of the attack, Cyan instinctively jumped backward, which reduced the impact of the blow. Maybe he didn't have experience in real fights, but that was still impressive. Eugene thought that if he considered Cyan's growth potential, he could still become a hero, even if he was an idiot. After all, he too was a descendant of Vermouth. Cyan, on the ground, asked how Eugene had managed to hit him with such a cheap trick. Eugene replied that maybe it was because they were twins, since they both spoke the same nonsense. Then he approached Cyan, still lying there after vomiting, and said that if he was from the illustrious direct bloodline, he should humbly admit he had lost the duel. Cyan knew he had to admit defeat, but he didn't want to. Eugene thought maybe he should have just ignored the poor kid, because now he was completely humiliated. At that moment, someone who looked like a butler approached. Eugene noticed that he wasn't wearing the family emblem, so he was probably a knight hired by the main family. He noticed that the man seemed skilled. The man called him Hezar and said that Cyan had lost. He said that Cyan had been the one to challenge the bumpkin to a duel and lost. Hezar came closer and asked if they had truly dueled. He apologized for the late introduction, saying he was Hezar, assigned as the tutor of young Master Cyan. Eugene then introduced himself, saying he was from the province of Gidal. Hezar asked if he knew Gerhard's estate, and Eugene confirmed, saying he was his son. Hezar wanted to know exactly what had happened. Eugene explained that Cyan had provoked him first and even insulted his father. Cyan protested, asking when he had done that, and Eugene reminded him that he asked whether his parents had taught him about honor, called him a coward, and therefore insulted not only him, but also his father. Then he asked if there was any reason not to accept the duel. Hezar replied that, in that case, the duel was acceptable. After that, he took Cyan away to treat his injuries and said they would meet again. Meanwhile, CL continued being sweet to Eugene, despite everything. Eugene just replied with a sure, without much interest. Later, he was devouring a huge meat-only feast, revealing how much of a carnivore he was. While he ate, Nina approached with the information he had asked for. She explained that young masters Deacon, Hansen, and Jewess would arrive the following afternoon, and in the evening, young masters Gargis and Desira would arrive through a teleportation portal. Eugene thought that everyone was gathering faster than he expected, since that was still just the beginning of the bloodline continuation ceremony. As he left, he kept thinking about Vermouth. From that point on, he planned to crush each of Vermouth's descendants, but he reflected that there was no reason to be angry. After all, he didn't even want to be a descendant of Vermouth. That reincarnation, to him, had been a complete misfortune. Meanwhile, Cyan went to talk to his mother, Anicelia, the second wife of the direct bloodline. She asked if it was true that her son had challenged the boy from the collateral line and lost. Hezar confirmed the information. Without hesitation, Anicelia told Cyan to come closer and slapped him hard, asking if he had really lost with just one blow. She ordered him to stay silent. Then she asked Hezar if he was certain the other boy had never trained mana. Hezar confirmed, saying that he was the son of Sir Gerhard, named Eugene, and that there was no trace of mana in his body. Anicelia asked Ciel how her brother had lost. Ciel explained that at the very beginning of the duel, Eugene charged with a spear, surprising Cyan, who tried to retreat but was struck by an attack that was far too fast. Anicelia asked if it had all ended with a single strike. When Cyan tried to say something, he received another slap from his mother. She questioned him for challenging someone so low and still losing, especially to a boy who had never trained mana. She said that his father would be returning soon for the ceremony and asked what she was supposed to tell him. Cyan begged his mother for forgiveness, but Anicelia turned to Hezar and said that at that moment she wanted to kill her own son with her bare hands. But since he was a knight favored by her husband, she couldn't act impulsively. So she asked Hezar to train Cyan so that he would never embarrass her again. She ordered him to take the boy away. Hezar obeyed, taking Cyan, who was crying heavily. Right after, Anicelia turned to her daughter and commented that the name of that boy was Eugene, and that she should get closer to him, since he was strong enough to surpass her brother. Deep down, Anicelia wanted Eugene dead as soon as possible, but she knew she would be the prime suspect if anything happened. In the Lionheart family, when a murder occurs, the guardians of the family code appear, and she needed to avoid that at all costs. Anicelia then repeated to her daughter that it was a good idea to stay close to Eugene, and Ciel agreed, saying that she also wanted to learn more about him because she would become his friend. The next day, 3 heirs from the collateral line arrived, but Eugene, as always, remained focused on his training. Soon Nina appeared, informing him that they had arrived. Eugene commented that they had come early. Nina agreed, but said the unexpected part was that the head of the family himself had also come. Eugene, surprised, asked if it was the head of the Lionheart family, and Nina confirmed, saying that he would need to go greet him. She also said he needed to change clothes beforehand. Eugene agreed, but realized he would probably be the only one to arrive late. He figured that, in that case, it was better to go just like that, all sweaty, so he wouldn't waste time. Later, everyone on the estate was already gathered to receive the head of the family. The welcoming committee was full, and Eugene began to recognize some important figures. Next to Cyan and Ciel was Anicelia, the second wife. In front of her was Theonis, the first wife. The boy standing next to Theonis was Iod Lionheart, the eldest son of the direct line and also first in the line of succession. Soon after, the leader of the family approached, Gillard Lionheart, and behind him came his younger brother, the family uncle, Cyan. Of course, Gillard went first to speak with his eldest son. He commented that Iod had grown quite a bit and asked if his skills had improved as well. Iod replied that he was doing his best to meet his father's expectations. Although he was his son, Gillard maintained a stern look. He then greeted the children of the second wife as well, saying they had grown so much he could hardly recognize them. Ciel said she missed her father, and Gillard mentioned that he had heard Guilford also had a son. He said he regretted not being present for the celebration. Guilford, Gillard's brother, told him not to worry about it. Then the leader looked toward the children from the collateral bloodline and announced that everyone would share a meal together, where they would discuss the details of the bloodline continuation ceremony. Thus, all the children were gathered at the table. On one side, the members of the main bloodline. On the other, those from the collateral line. The muscular boy there was Gargis, and the dark-skinned girl was Desira. Eugene thought that both had probably arrived with the head of the family via teleportation teleportation portal. Eugene wondered if those two, Desira and Gargis, were really that highly valued among the collateral lines. He was also curious about who that muscular blonde boy was. The dinner didn't seem to have been prepared just for the children and family. Ciel even asked her father directly who the guest was. Gillard said he would introduce him, but the blonde man stepped forward and said it was fine, and introduced himself as Lobarian from the Red Tower. The name caused immediate shock. Everyone was impressed upon hearing it. Lobarian, the master of the Red Tower. Even Eugene choked, spat out his coffee, and nearly suffocated, but covered it up, saying he was fine. He thought to himself that that man was a disciple of Sienna, the same Sienna who, 300 years ago, rose to become master of the Green Tower, becoming the youngest master in the history of Aroth. She completely reconstructed the magical foundations of the country, taught students from all the towers, and even mentored other tower masters. To this day, the masters of the Red and Green Towers still consider her the Grand Master of Aroth's magic. Eugene couldn't believe he would encounter someone of that level there. Gillard then asked if it was true that his name was Eugene, and said he had heard from Theonis that her son had insulted Eugene's father. Cyan became nervous, but Eugene confirmed, saying it was true, but that he didn't hold a grudge because of it. Gillard asked if he had won the duel, and Eugene replied yes, but said that even if he had lost, it wouldn't change what he thought. If he were too weak to defend his own honor, then he should at least endure the shame of defeat. Gillard commented that Eugene was better than his own son, and scolded Cyan, saying that he wasn't ashamed just because he had lost, but because of the way he chose his words, trying to justify the loss. He reminded him that the duel had started with an insult he made, and even after losing, Cyan didn't apologize. In front of his own father, he couldn't even explain himself. Gillard then said that anyone who carries the name Lionheart, being a descendant of the great Vermouth, must learn to honor not only themselves, but also their opponent. For that reason, he demanded that Cyan apologize to Eugene. Eugene thought it was all just for show, but Cyan obeyed. Gillard then asked if his father was really Sir Gerhard, and commented that he was sorry because he never met him in person. Eugene said it was fine, since his family lived in isolation in the countryside. When Gillard asked if it was his father who taught him to fight, Eugene explained that he learned the basics from him, but trained everything else by himself. Desira and Gargis were shocked by that. They assumed that someone of his level must have received special training. Knowing he learned everything on his own was surprising. Gillard said that the bloodline continuation ceremony would be interesting to watch. Soon the maids arrived carrying the dishes, an extremely refined banquet. The only odd thing was the presence of a pastry next to the lobster, but aside from that, everything was top-notch. Gillard wished everyone a good meal. Later, after everyone finished eating, Gillard resumed speaking. He said that, as he had mentioned earlier, the reason for that event was to explain the purpose of the bloodline continuation ceremony to all the present descendants. He admitted that, even though it might sound strange coming from him, he believed that traditional methods were highly discriminatory. He explained that the ceremony always favored the direct descendants. Children from collateral branches were not allowed to train mana or use real weapons until the ceremony, which made it impossible for them to surpass the children of the main bloodline. In this ceremony, 3 of his children would participate, but he did not want to test only the direct heirs. He wanted to evaluate the potential of everyone who bore the Lionheart name. The true purpose of the ceremony, according to him, was to prove who was worthy of being called a descendant of the great Vermouth, regardless of bloodline. Eugene reflected that if Gillard truly was a descendant of Vermouth, then he was certainly kinder than Vermouth ever was. Gillard concluded by saying that for this reason, in this edition of the ceremony, he had decided to ask for help from an outsider. That was when Lobarian explained that this was the reason for his presence. When Lobarian placed his fingers on the table, a holographic map made of mana appeared, floating above the surface. He explained that for this ceremony, everyone would explore a labyrinth he had created himself. Each participant would start at a different point, and the objective would be to defeat a monster located in the center. Along the way, there would be traps and enemies, but everything that happened inside would be illusory, created by magic. None of the experiences would be real, just an adventure full of action and fantasy. Eugene thought he was mixing summoning magic with mind control, and that he expected nothing less from a true tower master. Lobarian explained that if one of the 9 participants managed to defeat the labyrinth boss, the ceremony would end. Everyone would earn points based on their contributions, even if they did not win. Hansen asked if they would be trapped if they could not escape, but Lobarian assured them that they could leave whenever they wanted, though they would not receive any points. Eugene asked what the winner would get, and Gillade replied that the person could choose a treasure from the family's underground vault. Eugene got excited by by the idea, and later, while walking through the halls, he thought he would win the ceremony no matter what. He was already making plans about what to take from the treasure vault, but ended up being intercepted by Desira and Gargus. Gargus asked if he had really won the duel against Cyan, and Eugene replied yes, since he had no reason to lie. As the questions ended, he said he would leave. Gargus was confused by Eugene's attitude, and Desira chose not to comment. Later, Eugene was training with a wooden sword. Even with a heavy body and using weights, his strikes were still fast and powerful. Desira and Gargus were watching him, each carrying 2 spears. Eugene started to wonder if he was being followed by them. Without saying a word, Gargus approached, took off all his clothes, took a deep breath, and flexed his muscles. Eugene was confused by the scene and thought that guy had to be an idiot. Gargus offered to let him touch, but Eugene refused. Then Gargus explained that his family had a secret formula that accelerated muscle growth with training, without accumulating mana, and thus had no side effects. He asked if Eugene was interested. Eugene wondered if he was a supplement salesman, but Desira interrupted, saying that, of course, there were side effects. Both men and women who used that technique ended up growing beards on their faces. She mentioned that she heard Eugene used a spear against Cyan, but asked why he was now using a sword. He replied that he used both sword and spear. Desira asked if he truly mastered both weapons, and then threw one of the spears toward him. She said her specialty was the spear, and challenged Eugene to a duel. He thought it would be easier to deal with her in a fight than to keep listening to that lunatic trying to sell steroids. And he was also curious about the skills of the children from the other branches, so he accepted the challenge. Later, already prepared, Eugene asked why Gargus was still there. He replied that he would be the referee, because even if it was a duel, it had to be fair. Eugene thought that sounded like something an idiot he knew would say, and wondered if there was any chance that guy was a descendant of Molon. Gargus announced the start of the duel. Desira believed that whoever took the initiative always had the advantage, but she was completely surprised just by facing Eugene's stance, which showed no openings. He asked what she was waiting for. She should come at him with everything. Even trembling, Desira charged forward. Their spears clashed several times, and she kept attacking, but Eugene blocked everything with ease. He thought she was exceptional, managing all that without using mana. Considering her age, her potential for growth was also impressive, but even so, she was no match for him. In the end, Eugene broke her final strike and stated that he had not even gotten a scratch. Desira was shaken, wondering if he really blocked all her attacks without moving from his place. Even so, she thought his arrogance would someday lead to his defeat. Desira then charged again, but this time with a different strategy. Eugene continued to block her attacks, but he did not expect her to attempt to move from behind. Desira thought he would not be able to defend from that angle, so she tried to strike him from behind. However, Eugene reacted quickly, lifting his leg and stepping on the spear, preventing her from raising the weapon. With no other options, Desira surrendered the duel. Gargus declared that the winner was Eugene Lionheart. That night, Gargus appeared in Eugene's room while he was sleeping. He woke him up saying they needed to join forces. Eugene, still confused, asked why he woke him in the middle of the night just for that. Gargus replied that he wanted to hear his answer in person. Eugene said he knew the ceremony would take place inside the labyrinth, and that each person would start from a different entrance, so he did not understand how they could team up. Gargus explained that although the entrances were different, the destination was the same, the center of the labyrinth, where the boss was. He mentioned that the twins from the main bloodline would surely join forces, so he wanted the 3 of them to do the same. Eugene replied that he was sure he could defeat the boss on his own, but Desira, who was also in the room, said he was being too full of himself. She admitted he was strong, but said that if the 3 of them helped each other, they would definitely win. Eugene asked why Desira wanted so badly to defeat the boss of that labyrinth. She answered that, in the bloodline continuation ceremony, both direct and collateral descendants participate, but the collateral line never wins. However, this time, they had a real chance. Gargus, Desira, and he, the 3 of them together, could change that. She asked if Eugene also didn't want to defeat the main bloodline. Meanwhile, still during the night, it seemed that everyone was awake. Anicelia was thoughtful about the presence of the Master of the Red Tower. She believed he might have come with the intention of taking Iode as a disciple. Since childhood, Iode always preferred reading over fighting, and was increasingly interested in magic, learning little by little. If he truly were accepted as the Master's disciple, he would have to temporarily leave the main family. Meanwhile, Kyle and Cyan would continue to grow within the main house. Anicelia thought this would effectively mean Iode would be giving up his position as successor. However, even this ceremony would be a problem for her. Her son would always carry the mark of being the child of the second wife. Despite that, she remained confident. But if by any chance he were defeated by some random random child from a countryside family, it would be humiliating. Anicilia thought that if that Eugene boy really passed through the labyrinth first and was exceptional enough to humiliate the entire direct bloodline, then Cyan's defeat would be inevitable. 3 days later, the bloodline continuation ceremony finally began. In front of the labyrinth, Lobarian used his magic to gather all the descendants and explained that before they started, they would have to create their own weapons. To do so, they needed to mold the magical light with creativity, transforming it into whatever weapon they wanted. Many were confused and even scared by the task, but Cyan was the first to succeed. She created a small sword, more specifically, a rapier, fast and light. She asked what would happen if the sword broke. Lobarian explained that both the weapon and the labyrinth itself were made of magic, so nothing could actually break inside. Then Cyan asked if she could create an animal instead of a weapon. Lobarian replied that it was possible to create even a doll or a golem, but living creatures could not be made. When Iode asked why life couldn't be created, Lobarian explained that it was a magical taboo, since the creation of life was a privilege exclusive to living beings themselves. He was impressed by Iode's interest in magic. Gargus then created a massive great sword, saying it was identical to his favorite sword at home, except that now it looked like a real weapon, made exactly as he imagined. Desira also created her spear, and one by one everyone managed to materialize their weapons. Even though he had made a sword, Iode seemed unsatisfied with the result. Eugene, on the other hand, created a gladius and a shield. Cyan asked what Eugene would do if he ran into her inside the labyrinth and whether he would fight her. Eugene replied by asking if they were allowed to fight. Gilad confirmed that they were, since it was a competition, but reminded everyone that quick judgment and cooperation would also be important. Everyone there shared the Lionheart bloodline. Cyan thought about the word family and glanced at Eugene, who in turn thought that girl was really unpleasant. Since everyone had finished creating their weapons, Lobarian handed out necklaces to each participant. He explained that the necklaces were connected to each person's consciousness and would react if their stress levels became too high inside the labyrinth. That way, he could judge whether the situation was becoming dangerous and intervene if necessary. Eugene concluded that it was a safety mechanism. Lobarian also said that if they needed to leave, they only had to touch the gem and say the word help, and they would be immediately removed. With all instructions given, Lobarian authorized the entrance into the labyrinth. Although they all entered through the same portal, the paths would be different. One by one, they went in. Cyan, trying to seem nice, wished Eugene luck, but he replied dryly and stepped inside. He quickly found himself in a dark corridor that reminded him of his past life. He had explored so many labyrinths that it felt familiar. Observing the space, he noticed that the ceiling was blocked, but the corridor was wide enough for sword strikes. That was why he chose a combination of short sword and shield, something versatile that adapts to nearly all situations. Since the labyrinth was made for children, the difficulty was obvious, so he proceeded without fear. Meanwhile, one of the descendants from the lesser collateral families encountered slimes right at the start and got so scared that he touched the gem and called for help. Lobarian appeared and removed him from the labyrinth. 1 hour into the ceremony, 3 participants had already failed, all from less influential collateral families. Gilad told them to go rest, though they were visibly disappointed. The remaining 6 continued exploring the labyrinth, while Gilad and Lobarian watched everything through magic. Gargis, despite his impressive physical strength, used a large weapon that hindered him inside the narrow corridors. He often hit the walls, but even so, he was strong enough to destroy the goblins by smashing through obstacles with his attacks. Despite being a bit clumsy, Gargis was doing very well and had no trouble fighting the monsters. Desira, on the other hand, was more agile than strong. She quickly dodged the slimes and killed the first one, although she thought it was difficult to fight that kind of enemy using a physical weapon. Still, she intended to press on until she found an opening. She was cunning and fast, focused on traversing the labyrinth while avoiding combat whenever possible. Meanwhile, Cyan was going through a section full of traps, but he didn't seem worried. He knew exactly what to expect because his mother had given him a map of the labyrinth. Both he and Cyan had studied the map carefully, so they would not be caught off guard by obvious traps. To deactivate one, Cyan used a small rock to trigger an arrow mechanism and pass through easily. He was naturally cautious, which helped him avoid any unnecessary danger. Cyan, in turn, was fighting a goblin. Even though she was agile, she stayed calm during the fight and managed to defeat it easily. However, she ended up reaching a dead end. Annoyed, she decided to turn back. She had great instincts and reflexes, but she was still immature and tended to act impulsively. At the same time, Iode was also fighting a goblin. Instead of fear, he showed fascination. destruction. He thought the monster was entirely made of magic, and when it attacked, he easily blocked the blows and decapitated it. Seeing the goblin dissolve into magical dust, he felt pleased with the result. Lobarian, watching everything, commented that Iode seemed genuinely interested in magic. Gilead agreed, explaining that since he was a baby, he had shown curiosity about spells. They even tried hiring a teacher from the capital, but Iode refused formal instruction. Along the way, Gilead said the boy had surrendered to reality and believed he needed to become the next family leader because of his mother. In Verm, magic wasn't as valued as the tradition of family leadership. Lobarian understood the dilemma, saying that magic held infinite possibilities, but he acknowledged that the path was difficult. Gilad wished Iode still had enough passion to pursue the arcane path, because if he did, he wouldn't be able to refuse an opportunity offered by Lobarian. However, Lobarian said he couldn't promise anything. He could recognize the boy as someone with potential, but if his talent was lacking, he couldn't take him as a disciple. Gilad replied that he didn't intend to force him into anything. He just wanted him to follow his own dreams. He explained that, in truth, the family didn't follow the teachings of their ancestor Vermouth, but revered the sage Sienna. Lobarian agreed, saying he had always preferred the sage's story in the records about hero Vermouth's group, as she was the one who invented new spells whenever the group was in trouble. Gilad said he read many of those stories as a child, but revealed that his favorite character wasn't Sienna, nor Vermouth. Before he could say who it was, Gilad was interrupted by something he saw through the magic. He pointed to one of the battles and was surprised by what Eugene was about to face. Eugene stood before a large orc, which immediately launched an attack so strong it cracked part of the floor. Even so, Eugene was fast enough to strike several vital points on the creature's body. He massacred it with clean, efficient technique. Lobarian and Gilad were impressed. Eugene defeated the orc with ease, as if it were nothing, and moved on without even looking at the enemy's body, which lay there covered in green blood. Gilad said he was amazing, considering he was only 13. It was uncommon for a child to have that kind of combat experience against an orc, yet instead of freezing in fear, Eugene neutralized it calmly. Lobarian explained that the orc wasn't meant for direct combat. It was more of a trap designed to force the children to find creative ways to escape. Even so, Eugene not only faced it, but killed it effortlessly. Gilad acknowledged that even though he was just a child, Eugene's talent was undeniable. Lobarian said he knew exactly what people said about someone like him. He was a genius. At that moment, Gargis was also facing an orc. He was wounded, his body full of arrows. But even while bleeding, he advanced with his massive blade. He slashed the orc's leg, knocking it down, and took the chance to drive his sword into the creature's chest, finishing the fight. He looked more like a beast than a boy, and as soon as he killed the enemy, the orc's body dissolved into the air. Gargis collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Gargis thought his muscles were completely torn, and that even his ribs might be broken. He reflected on the traps he had fallen into. The orc he fought, and considering how injured he was, he doubted the others were in any better shape. Even so, he collapsed midway. Meanwhile, Cyan also encountered an orc. He analyzed the monster's size and concluded that it probably wasn't placed there to be defeated. So, he threw a small stone at it, as if the orc were just another trap, and walked by without concern. Soon after, he ran into his sister. The twins were finally together again. Cyan said that if they had found each other, it meant they were close to the center. He told Cyan this was a good thing, and that if she followed him, they wouldn't get lost. He was still thinking about how he had been humiliated by Eugene in front of her days earlier, and saw this as his chance for redemption, an opportunity to restore his reputation. Cyan then raised a question. Since the labyrinth was an illusion, technically it could contain any type of monster. She asked if ghosts could appear. Cyan immediately panicked and asked if she was scared. He tried to calm her, saying that no matter what appeared, he would handle it. But then they encountered a blood-covered figure. He thought it was a ghost or a zombie, but it was just Desira. He screamed, startled, and asked how she dared to scare him like that. Desira answered that he was the one who scared her by screaming out of nowhere. Cyan asked why she was covered in blood and if she was planning a surprise attack. Desira explained that she had been hurt by a trap, nothing more, but that was a lie. In truth, she really did want to take out the two of them. She thought her first ambush had failed. Cyan commented that she had been running away, and Cyan realized he had been made a fool of again. He thought he would not forgive her, and decided to chase her. Desira knew that she didn't stand a chance against the two of them, and wondered where that airhead was, referring to Gargis, who she imagined was lying somewhere completely wrecked. During the escape, Desira triggered another trap, but managed to narrowly avoid it, leaving the path behind her blocked. Cyan wondered if they should go around, but he thought again. He couldn't look like an idiot idiot in front of his sister again. He wanted to save his mana for the boss fight, but he had no choice. He finally activated his mana, strengthening his body and jumping easily over the obstacle. He tried to help Sayal, but she jumped with even more grace than he did. Cyan simply thought that was to be expected of his sister. They continued chasing Desira until they reached the center of the labyrinth. There, they encountered the boss, and Eugene was already there. He asked why they had arrived together, saying he was curious to see who would show up first. Sayal stated that he had been the first to arrive. Eugene confirmed that and said it was true. Desira commented that he had probably waited for the others because he agreed to form a team. Eugene explained that even though he was capable of defeating the boss alone and quickly, it would be disappointing for the others who had worked so hard to make it that far. Cyan, already irritated, began to lose his patience. Eugene explained that the boss only attacked from a certain distance, and that, for now, it was resting. He also said that based on arrival order, Desira should fight first, then Cyan, and then Sayal. Desira asked if he really wanted her to face the boss alone. Eugene replied yes and commented that she looked injured. He said that if she felt she couldn't win, she should just give up. Desira refused, grabbed a cloth, tied it around her head like a headband, and headed into the fight. Cyan asked if Eugene himself wasn't going to fight. Eugene said he would after the others had tried. Cyan asked if he really thought it would come to his turn, as if he would lose to the others. Eugene answered that if Cyan managed to defeat the boss, he would call him Big Brother for the rest of his life. Cyan told him not to forget those words. While Desira was getting ready, the others sat down to wait. Cyan thought that the Minotaur was a classic labyrinth monster, and that, now seeing it in person, it was even bigger than the orc he had faced before. However, the Minotaur only seemed grand. It didn't look as strong as a troll or other monsters that Cyan knew he could face alone. Then the Minotaur finally opened its eyes and stood before its first challenger, Desira. She thought the creature was huge and was stunned just imagining she'd have to take down something that size. But having come so far, she knew she couldn't back down. She lunged with a spear thrust, but had to quickly dodge when the Minotaur tried to stomp on her. It was hard to recover, but she still pressed forward and managed to pierce its hide. However, the creature's skin was so tough that the spear caused no damage, not even breaking through the surface. The Minotaur then grabbed Desira and she was ready to die, but instead she was tossed like a sack of potatoes to the end of the hallway. Sayal wondered why the Minotaur had done that instead of killing her outright. Eugene explained that the creature wasn't an ordinary monster, and that the moment she was caught, the winner had already been decided. Cyan then stepped forward, saying it was his turn, and he wanted to show Eugene that the blood of the main family was on a different level. But Eugene just smiled, which made Cyan even more irritated with that arrogant bastard who thought he could defeat that little cow. Cyan then gathered mana and concentrated it in his sword, which even impressed Desira because he had created a mana blade, a type of weapon capable of cutting through anything. Normally, it would take at least 10 years of mana training to accomplish that. The difference between them and the main family was truly vast, and Eugene thought that at their age, it was already an impressive feat. Cyan knew he couldn't maintain that mana blade for long, but he believed it would be enough to cut the Minotaur. However, within seconds, the aura completely vanished. Eugene remembered the words of the family head, who was seeking ways to avoid giving the main family an advantage, and he realized that was exactly what Lobarian had done. In the center of the labyrinth, it was not possible to use mana. Eugene thought that, regardless of origin, everyone would fight on equal footing there. Meanwhile, Cyan was in despair, not understanding why his mana blade wasn't working. Eugene said that if he thought he was going to lose, it was better to get out of the way instead of getting beaten just out of stubbornness. But Cyan wanted to impress his little sister and believed he could defeat that miserable monster. He ran toward the Minotaur like a flea, was nearly caught, but managed to cut the creature's arm and kept dodging its countless attacks. Still, Eugene thought that small cuts like that wouldn't take it down. He needed to aim for the legs. When he finally got close to the creature's legs, the Minotaur blocked the attack with its knee and then grabbed Cyan, throwing him aside just like it had done to Desira. Eugene commented that he had lost too, so next in line was Kyle, but she refused, saying she couldn't even use her mana blade in that place. Eugene thought she was much smarter than her brother and decided he would face the creature himself. Sayal asked if he could really defeat it, and Eugene answered that it was impossible for him to lose. He approached determinedly, already wondering how exactly he would do it. He dodged the first strike and used the opening to climb up the Minotaur's arm, nearly getting grabbed again, but quickly climbed to the creature's head. The Minotaur didn't seem to mind him up there and tried to hit its own head. Eugene dodged and the creature ended up injuring itself like an idiot. Then, Eugene took the opportunity to strike the weak spot on its neck, causing an absurd amount of blood to gush out. Everyone was impressed. Desira noticed that he had struck directly at the carotid artery, and that the cut was so precise it made the Minotaur collapse. Shortly after, it was dead. Eugene, completely covered in green blood, asked if everyone had seen what he had done. He had won. Cyan complained, telling him not to get cocky, that if he had his mana blade, he would have won too. Still, Cyan thought that even if he had defeated the creature, it wouldn't have been so easily. He admitted that what he felt toward Eugene wasn't just fear, but a constant nervousness, and he kept wondering what that strange feeling was. A few seconds later, the Minotaur's gear and body disappeared, which meant the ceremony had ended. Yahello was impressed, and asked Lobarian if that wasn't great, since a child from a collateral family, who hadn't even trained mana, managed to defeat the Minotaur with overwhelming skill. Lobarian agreed that it was truly impressive. Facing a Minotaur alone was extremely difficult, and that's why he had emphasized the importance of teamwork. That ceremony was created precisely so the children would cooperate and look for creative methods, which was why the boss had been designed that way. But Eugene had simply surpassed everything, going through traps and monsters with ease. Lobarian then wondered what kind of boy that was. Gilead explained that he did nothing but train since he arrived, and they had even sent people to his hometown, Geidel, to investigate. What they knew most about Eugene was his persistence. Gilead stated that the boy was born to fight, with a combat instinct that matched the body he had. In the end, he concluded that just by discovering a treasure like Eugene, that ceremony had already been worth it. Lobarian asked if Gilead did not feel bothered, since that boy was clearly much better than his own children. With such a wide gap, he wondered how much larger it would become once Eugene started properly training with mana. But Gilead replied that it was a reason for joy, because Eugene could make the Lionheart name shine even brighter. Then Lobarian asked a more direct question, wanting to know what would happen if Eugene wished to become the next successor of the family. Gilead responded that the position of family head should be occupied by the greatest among the Lionhearts, and if his sons could not defend the right they were born with, then they were not worthy of leading the family. Lobarian apologized for speaking too much as an outsider, and then dispelled the magical camp around them. Even so, he advised Gilead to consider something and suggested he should adopt Eugene as a son. Gilead was shocked by the suggestion, and Lobarian explained that the mere idea of a collateral descendant surpassing someone from the direct bloodline would be enough for the collateral families to start looking down on the main branch. This could lead to problems and misfortune. Gilead admitted it was good advice and found the proposal quite tempting, but first he needed to congratulate the boy personally. Soon all the descendant children began to approach. All of them were in perfect condition, as everything that happened had been within a magical labyrinth. Gilead thought that Iode probably did not even reach the center of the labyrinth, having been too distracted by magic. In a ceremony meant to prove one's worth, losing focus was quite disappointing. In comparison, Cyan and Cal had passed through traps and monsters without much difficulty. The reason they failed to defeat the Minotaur could be attributed to lack of experience. Gilead said that everyone had done well because he had observed each one's path from the start of the labyrinth to their return. He thought it would be a tough test, but everyone did an excellent job. He then approached Eugene, the one who stood out the most among the 9 children in the ceremony. He thanked him for his efforts and acknowledged that the decisions Eugene made throughout the journey were incredible, especially defeating the orc with ease. Even Gargis had been shocked by that, thinking that the kid had defeated the orc without even getting hurt. Gargis regretted that if he had taken the family's muscle-enhancing medicine, he surely would have been stronger. Lobarian was also impressed. He admitted that he thought the children would be lost in the labyrinth for days, but realized he had underestimated them. Even being so young, they were all descendants of Vermouth, and just looking at them was like seeing precious gems. Gilead said they should all rest now. He would prepare a great banquet, though not the best, since they finished the test too early, so they could continue the banquet the next day. He asked Lobarian to take all the children back. However, Eugene would not go with them. He would accompany the head of the family. Raciel asked if he would receive his reward at that moment, and the head replied there was no reason to delay, saying it would be better to choose the gift now. Ciel thought she had asked several times to go to the treasure chamber, but in the end, her father never took her, and now Eugene was heading there. On the way, Gilead praised Eugene, saying he did very well with the different weapons he used. He defeated monsters with a sword and shield inside the labyrinth, and even used a spear in the duel against Cyan and Desira. Eugene was surprised and wondered if the family head already knew about the duel with Desira, but it made sense, since he was the head head of the family and needed to be aware of all information. Gilade continued, saying that the weapon that currently symbolized the lion hearts was the sword, but their ancestor, the Great Vermouth, wielded various weapons with ease. That was why he was called the god of war, the master of all. However, Vermouth was not the only one so proficient. His companion Sir Hamill was also a great master, even before Vermouth himself. Eugene had already read in books that Hamill was called a fool, and Gilade said he had also read that story when he was younger. He said that if Hamill had not been so troublesome, the story would not have been so fun, and he admitted that, to be honest, he liked Hamill much more than Vermouth. Eugene asked what exactly Gilade meant by preferring Hamill's qualities. Gilade explained that he always felt inferior to Vermouth, but he never gave up. On the contrary, he always pushed himself to grow stronger and overcome his own limits. In the end, he made the greatest sacrifice to save his friends. Eugene thought the book sounded a bit exaggerated, but still told the family head that he also preferred Hamill. Later, they were approaching the underground chamber. When they descended, it looked more like a dungeon. Gilade explained that Eugene was the first person, besides the family head, to enter that place. That was because a promise is a promise, and Eugene had to choose his treasure, something already discussed by the Senate elders, made up of important people, including former heads and even members from the collateral line. Eugene asked what the actual value of those treasures was, and Gilade said they included heirlooms passed down for hundreds of years, including those left by Vermouth himself. The sacred sword was also there, but he would not be able to choose it. It was the symbol of the Lionheart family and could not be given to anyone. Eugene commented that it was a shame, but Gilad explained that the only reason was because the sword had never acknowledged anyone other than Vermouth. He added that Eugene would understand as soon as he saw it. When they approached the chamber's door, Gilad used his own blood to unlock it. A loud clank was heard, and a lion emblem appeared on the door's surface, which then opened. Only Eugene could enter. The family head would wait outside and suggested he make the most of the opportunity while choosing. Eugene thanked him for the gesture. Upon entering, Eugene smiled widely. The first thing he did was try to grab the sacred sword. That sword had existed since the founding of the Holy Empire of Eurus, having been sealed for a long time in the central temple and acknowledging only Vermouth as its master 300 years ago. It was the same sword that pierced the Demon King of Massacre, the fifth greatest entity in the demon realm. After that, it had only been used as a symbol. Now standing before it, Eugene tried to pull it by the hilt, but the sword did not budge. He realized there was no point in insisting and decided to look for another weapon. That was when he saw before him an arsenal of legendary weapons. There was Aspel, the gluttonous sword, which consumed the mana it cut and transformed it into power, able to release a powerful spell in a single strike. However, only Vermouth used it properly, as he was also an excellent mage, so Eugene knew it was beyond his capabilities. There was also the draconic spear Karbos, which needed time to heat up but could unleash flames comparable to a dragon's breath. The Stormblade Wyneth was a sword blessed by the Wind King, an elemental spirit, and could store enough mana to summon him. The furious Thunderbow Pernoa could fire lightning regardless of distance. Jabel's flying illusion sword, when infused with human mana, turned into a whip with hundreds of blades. And there was also Geedon's shield, which could ignore all attacks as if they were nothing. Eugene was impressed. The weapons were so incredible that he wouldn't regret choosing any of them. Even so, he wondered if those were really all that remained. He noticed the absence of the Moonlight Sword and the demonic spear, and concluded that after 300 years, perhaps the best ones had already been taken. Among what was left, Wyneth seemed to be the best choice. It allowed the use of wind elementals, and could store enough mana to summon the king of wind elementals. However, learning spirit magic was complicated, and even talented mages struggled to control a low-ranking elemental. While still in the room, he decided to explore a little more. He discovered that there were not only weapons, but also artifacts, gems, and accessories. That was when he saw something familiar, his necklace. The same necklace he had worn in his past life. It was a memento from his parents, who had been devoured by monsters. Eugene had avenged them personally, after a long time, and had worn that necklace until his final breath. He wondered if Vermouth had taken his body home. It seemed not, and that it had been discarded immediately. The promise made between Vermouth and the Demon King of Confinement was to bring peace to the world, but that meant that Helmuth and the two Demon Kings were still alive. Even though they had said that the 5 of them defeated the demons, Eugene wondered what kind of promise had actually been made, especially when seeing that keepsake left behind by Vermouth. If it had been his fault, maybe for dying along the way, his companions may have lost their strength. He didn't want to hate Vermouth or the others, as they surely had a good reason for not defeating the Demon King back then. So Eugene Eugene returned to where the weapons were. There were several he wanted, but more than anything, he didn't want to leave that necklace behind. He wanted to take it with him. Gilead asked if that was really his choice, and Eugene confirmed it was, saying he liked it. Gilead commented that there were so many amazing treasures in that room, but Eugene said all of them were objects he still couldn't use properly. Gilead asked to take a look at the necklace. It was old, rough, without any valuable gem or elegant craftsmanship, just a cheap necklace. He wondered what something like that was doing there. When he brought it near the lion's mouth that guarded access to the vault, Gilead realized that the necklace wasn't even registered in the treasure room. It was an item that shouldn't even be inside. He told Eugene the necklace had no value, and that even if he tried to sell it, he wouldn't get anything in return. Even so, Eugene said he wanted to keep it. Gilead replied there was not much to be done. He would ask Labyrinth to evaluate it, since it was an unknown item and there was a chance it contained some kind of enchanted spell. Eugene asked if he could keep the necklace after the evaluation, and Gilead confirmed he could, regardless of the result. In truth, he didn't expect something like that to happen. Technically, Eugene had chosen something that wasn't even considered a treasure, so he would have the right to return and choose another. That was part of the original promise. Eugene was excited by that, thinking that for someone so sensitive, it was hard to believe that man was really a descendant of Vermouth, stubborn as a rock. Without hesitation, Eugene went back and grabbed the Stormblade Winneth. He chose that sword as his new master. Later, Desira asked why he had chosen a sword instead of a spear. She commented that he was really good with spears. Eugene replied that he was also good with swords. Gargis thought the sword looked too light and said that with Eugene's strength he could use a hammer or an axe. But Eugene stated that the choice had been his. Gargis asked if he didn't want to visit his family now that the ceremony was over, saying he could offer several muscle growth potions. Eugene stayed calm and ignored him. Desira said to forget that meathead and draw the sword already. She was curious to see it. When Eugene pulled the blade, it shone brightly. He presented the weapon as the Stormblade Winneth and explained that it was blessed by the Wind Elemental King, capable of personally summoning him once he started training his mana. Desira thought that was really cool, but said she still preferred a spear. She asked if he had seen the draconic spear Carbos, which breathed fire like a dragon's breath. Eugene pretended not to know anything and said he had no idea what that was. Then Desira asked about the demonic spear Ruintos, considered the most powerful weapon in Vermouth's arsenal. Gargis said he had heard a lot about Ruintos, the spear used by the Demon King of Brutality. Eugene remembered that time. 300 years ago, there were 5 Demon Kings in the Kingdom of Helmuth. The Demon King of Apocalypse was rank 1, Confinement was rank 2, Delirium was rank 3, Brutality was rank 4, and Massacre was rank 5. But Gargis interrupted, saying that was wrong. To him, the strongest weapon in Vermouth's arsenal was definitely Gigalas, the merciless Crusher. Desira insisted that the Demon King of Brutality was stronger than the one of Massacre, but Gargis replied that a demon's rank didn't reflect the power of its weapon. They stood there arguing over which weapon was the most powerful. Eugene thought that the Crusher wasn't in the vault either. Among Vermouth's weapons, only those two, Ruintos and Gigalas, were demonic. Because they were so dangerous, perhaps they had been sealed elsewhere. While the two kept bickering like children, Eugene thought that both weapons were so good, it was hard to say which was better. But if someone told him to choose the most powerful of all, he wouldn't even hesitate. It would be the Moonlight Blade, destruction in the form of a sword, sealed in the depths of Helmo. Both the Demon Kings of Brutality and Massacre had been killed by the devastating light of the Moonlight Blade. For now, however, he had Winneth, and as he held it for the first time, he felt as if he was finally holding a true sword in this life. He could sense the flow of the blade as if it were playing with him. It felt like a dance in the air. His movements were fast and subtle. Gargis commented that the swordplay was magnificent, and even Desira was impressed. Meanwhile, in the family head's office, Lobarian was conducting tests on the necklace. After a while, he declared that the necklace had no magic at all. He asked if they were sure that item had actually been inside the treasure vault. He suspected that Eugene might be deceiving Gilead. Gilead said Eugene had no reason to deceive him. If he hadn't allowed him to pick another treasure, Eugene would have left empty-handed. Lobarian said it had been a risky move. The necklace had no present magic, but he could investigate further. There was a spell that allowed the reading of mana memories, created by the great master Cyan. The sage explained that mana exists everywhere, and most objects retain traces of it. Lobarian offered to read the mana memories of the necklace, and Gilead authorized it, saying he trusted him. Lobarian began the reading. At first, there was nothing interesting. The memories revealed that the necklace necklace had been sold several times over the last 100 years. He even saw old images of the capital's streets, where the necklace passed from hand to hand, but he couldn't see anything beyond that. The magic within the treasure vault likely interfered with the object's mana. Gilad remarked that no one alive would remember where the necklace originally came from. Liberian asked what he intended to do with it. Gilad replied that, since the necklace had no magic, he would give it to Eugene. The boy wanted it so much it would be a waste to throw it away. Liberian then said that Gilad was clearly starting to like the kid, and Gilad, with a big smile on his face, didn't even try to deny it. He asked why he wouldn't like him. After all, he was going to go far. The next morning, the one who came to deliver a message to Eugene was Cyan, Gilad's older brother. He was a man known for never having married, the only member of the Lionheart family who had accompanied Gilad on his journeys. Eugene greeted him politely, but Cyan already knew who he was. He commented that the collateral boy who had defeated members of the main family had made quite the impression. Eugene then asked why he had come in person. Cyan explained that his brother had planned to send another knight, but he took the opportunity to deliver the message himself. He said that he actually wanted to see Eugene in person, as he had heard a lot about him, though he hadn't been able to attend the ceremony. The tradition was that only the head of the family could observe, although this time, Liberian had also participated to assist. Cyan made it clear that he wasn't upset with Gilad for that, he was just explaining the tradition. Perhaps he seemed a little dissatisfied with the family's rules. Eugene replied that he really didn't mind. Cyan said he knew, and that Gilad probably didn't care either. Eugene thought that man had a natural sense of freedom that even showed in the way he spoke. His personality was strong and free, and maybe that was the reason he had never married. As they walked through the corridors, Eugene asked why exactly the family head had called for him. Cyan said it might just be to congratulate him for winning the ceremony. Eugene said he had already been congratulated. Then he commented that Cyan didn't know the reason for the summons either. Cyan confirmed, saying he really had no idea, but he also didn't care. Still, he was glad he could see Eugene more often, and Eugene replied that the feeling was mutual. When they arrived at the door, Cyan knocked and was immediately allowed in. He winked at Eugene, who found the gesture friendly, though a bit domineering. Inside, Gilad was waiting with a table full of sweets. He said he was sorry for calling him so suddenly. Later, while eating sweets and drinking tea, Gilad said he had asked Liberian to evaluate the necklace, but confirmed it was just an ordinary necklace with no magic. Even the mana memory had been read, and no anomaly was found. Eugene wondered if that was really the memory reading magic created by Sienna, as he had almost forgotten such a spell existed. Then he asked exactly what the memory showed. Gilad explained that, according to Liberian, the necklace seemed to have been sold more than 100 years ago on the capital's streets. But Eugene was confused, because that made no sense. It was the same necklace he had worn for decades. 300 years ago. He knew that for sure. There was no mistaking it. At the same time, he saw no reason for Liberian to lie. Maybe he had misread the mana memory. Maybe someone had overwritten the memory with a new one. Whoever did something like that would have to be a mage as powerful as a tower master. Could it have been Vermouth himself? There was no way to know. Even so, Eugene asked if he could keep the necklace. Gilad confirmed that yes, that was the agreement. Eugene was really excited to be able to wear it again. Gilad said he had called him to talk about the necklace, but that was just an excuse. There was another reason. Something more serious. He said that it might seem sudden, but it was a very good offer. Before the family head could continue, Eugene interrupted, saying that Cyan was pretty cute, but he wasn't thinking about marriage. He already suspected that the girl's friendly attitude and the state he left her brother in were part of a setup for some kind of political marriage. He said he was still too young for that and would need his father's permission. Gilad laughed and said Eugene was getting it all wrong. It wasn't about marrying Cyan. The boy turned red with embarrassment, realizing he had let his 13-year-old imagination run wild. He wondered if he was going crazy after being reincarnated. In fact, Gilad wanted to adopt him as his son. Eugene was surprised. He found the proposal shocking. He also thought it was a good way to tie him to the main family, but it was still unexpected. He said it was too sudden. Gilad replied that it wasn't as sudden as a marriage proposal. He mentioned that he was also thinking of inviting Eugene's father, Gerhard, to join the main family. Eugene was taken aback, saying that in that case, he would have two fathers. Gilad answered that it wasn't something he needed to overthink. It would simply mean that Eugene's family would become part of the main bloodline. He said he was a father to 3 children and didn't want to steal Gerhard's son, which is why he hadn't yet brought it up with him, but promised to respect Gerhard as a brother. Eugene asked if refusing to become his son would mean disrespecting his father. Gilad said of course not, and admitted, even if it was a little embarrassing to say it face to face, that he wasn't a petty man. If Eugene declined, he would only be a little disappointed, but he would respect his choice and wish him the best for his future. Eugene replied replied that he couldn't decide this alone and would have to speak with his father. Gilad agreed and said they would delay the banquet as he would send people to Gidal to bring Gerhard personally. Eugene asked what that would mean for his future. Gilad replied that living there would bring many opportunities. First, there would be several nights to train him. Eugene said that if he was going to learn from someone, he wanted to learn from the best. He asked if, by becoming his son, Gilad would train him personally. He wanted to know how powerful the head of the Lionheart family really was. Gilad replied that yes, Eugene could learn from him, but there was someone even more suitable, Cyan himself. Even as head of the family, Gilad admitted that Cyan had now surpassed him in strength. Eugene was impressed and wondered if that man was truly stronger than the family head. Gilad asked if Eugene had received a mana training method from his father. Eugene said yes, but confessed he didn't want to learn anything before the ceremony. Still, he admitted he might already be absorbing knowledge without realizing it. The family head commented that Eugene had always been very studious, even before coming to that place. He explained that the mana accumulation found in strong monsters is called a mana stone, and that it is common to use such stones as an aid when learning to manipulate mana. Although effective, they are also hard to obtain. That's why, when a novice starts training, it's normal for an experienced person to help them make proper use of the stone, so it doesn't go to waste. All of this would be practically impossible in Eugene's original family, which lived in an environment lacking in resources and opportunities for growth and development. Gilad thought maybe he shouldn't have said that, as it might make Eugene look down on his birth family, but still mentioned he had something else to discuss with Gerhard when he arrived. Ending the conversation, he said that was all for now, but if Jin wasn't well, he would like to talk about something else. Time passed and everyone ate a lot. Eugene said he would head back, but Gilad said he would call someone to escort him, asking him to wait a bit. Eugene replied it was fine, since it wasn't far, and he could treat it as a casual walk. Walking through the halls, he caught a scent in the air and noticed something strange in a corner. Something wasn't moving. It was just standing there, waiting for him. Still, he passed by and ended up encountering Anicelia, who pretended to be surprised to see him, though it was clear she had been waiting. Eugene decided to play along and introduced himself formally and politely. Anicelia commented that she had heard Gilad was speaking privately with Eugene, but since it had taken so long, she didn't know he was still around. He then asked if there was something she wanted to know, and Anicelia thought that boy was very insolent, that his arrogance was crossing the line, but acknowledged it was understandable. After all, he was a bumpkin who won directly in a duel and even received a ceremony. Without a doubt, he would grow tremendously in the future. Anicelia concluded it would be better to be friendly with him. She thought that if he married Sile, it wouldn't be a bad thing either, and that was why she had told Sile to stay close to him. She then said she was only curious about what he had talked about with the family head. Eugene replied that it was better not to say, and Anicelia said she understood and didn't intend to pry. Changing the subject, she asked if she had caused any trouble for him in the past few days, especially with the ceremony approaching. She apologized for forgetting to ask that earlier. Eugene replied that she didn't need to worry, as Shan had already apologized. Ranizella said it was good to see how mature he was for his age, and added that she was very pleased. She said she had scolded Shan firmly after what happened, and hoped they could become great friends. Eugene, with some sarcasm, said that they were from the same family and shared the same name. Anicelia took that as an insult, and although he technically wasn't wrong, his words irritated her. Eugene asked if he could leave, and Anicelia said yes, apologizing for taking his time. Eugene thought that this was the second wife of the house, the same one who had humiliated him on the first day for being from a collateral line. He didn't want to get involved with her. 2 days later, Gerhard arrived from distant Gaidley along with Gian. He wondered if his son had really won the bloodline continuation ceremony. He was deeply moved upon learning that his son had defeated the children of the main family. He had always believed Eugene was extraordinary from a very young age, but he knew talent alone wasn't enough to compete with the power of the main bloodline. For a long time, he thought his son would have to face that harsh reality, but now he was being surprised by him. Eugene was there to receive him along with the head of the family. The first thing Gerhard did was hug his son tightly and say how proud he was. Eugene said he had promised to return with good news, and Gerhard replied that it was true, that he was sorry for not trusting his son enough. When he faced the family head, he felt embarrassed and apologized for the late introduction. He introduced himself as Gerhard Lionheart from the province of Gidal. Gilade apologized for the rudeness of making such a sudden invitation, but Gerhard replied that there was no rudeness at all. On the contrary, he was very grateful to be there. Gilade said he didn't want to take away father and son time, but that he would like to speak with him privately. Gerhard said, "Of course, it would be a pleasure." Later, Gerhard was listening to everything about the adoption proposal, and the family had explained that if Eugene were adopted into the main family, Gerhard himself would also be accepted as a member. He acknowledged that it was a very sudden proposal. Gerhard stood up, and even though what he was about to say might seem rude, he said he was very grateful to see his son looking so positive and confident, but he couldn't help but think differently when considering his future. He said that the head of the family might have good intentions, but he was worried about the persecution Eugene could face from other family members. Gilead himself already had 3 children, and if he adopted a new one, this adopted child might seem like he was stealing their place, becoming a target for attacks. The head of the family replied that he understood what he meant, but explained that he didn't want to limit Eugene's future. The main family placed great importance on the legitimate bloodline of descendants, and while that was a problem, it could also be an advantage for Eugene, because even if adopted, he would have no right to the position of family head, so he wouldn't be seen as a direct threat to the other children. Gilead's intention was for Eugene to become a brother to his children as an adopted child of the main family, and from there, form bonds with them. That relationship could open many opportunities for Eugene in the future. Gerhard replied that he would discuss it with his son. Meanwhile, Eugene was doing what he did best, training. He was demonstrating his agility in fencing when he noticed the look on his father's face and realized he was affected, probably because of the adoption issue. Gerhard recognized the sword his son carried in its sheath. It was the Stormblade, Wynneth, the sword Eugene had personally chosen from the treasure room. Even if he sold their house and everything they had in the territory, Gerhard knew they could never afford a sword like that. He then told Eugene that the head of the family had spoken about the adoption. Eugene confirmed that they had already mentioned it to him. Gerhard said he hoped it would be something good for his son's future, but also warned that it could bring difficulties. Eugene agreed, said he would surely face obstacles, but assured him that his father should trust him. He said that since he was a child, he was never the kind of person who gives up. Gerhard then told Eugene never to forget the name he carries, a name chosen by him and his late wife, and asked him to never forget it. Eugene said yes and stated that even if he became an adopted child, his real father would always be Gerhard Lionheart. He got so emotional that he cried again. Eugene thought that, in the end, it really seemed like he would be adopted. Even if several situations became more annoying, he had much to gain from it, so he thought it was worth enduring. He might not want to be the head of the family, but he knew others wouldn't believe that. The first wife, Theonis, and the second wife, Anicilia, would have no choice but to be cautious of him, and there were only 2 ways to deal with that situation: either ignore everything or crush everything in his path. Later, Gilad, as the head of the family, invited all the children and relatives of those who participated in the ceremony to a grand banquet. The intention was to celebrate the collateral bloodline's victory, so the focus wasn't on the humiliation suffered by the main family. Right in front of Gerhard appeared Desera's father and Gargus's father. Desera's father commented that Gerhard had an exceptional son and said he heard he would be joining the main family. Gargus's father spoke about his family's secret muscle growth medicine, saying that not even the main family had something like that, and asked if Gerhard was interested. Desera's father said it was fate that had brought them all together, and that they could talk more to get to know each other better, since they were all from the collateral bloodline. Gerhard, a bit nervous, replied that of course it could be, but deep down he thought it would be better not to get too close, or else he would end up becoming the center of attention. Just by looking, it was obvious that was Gargus's father. Meanwhile, Cyan was with his mother, completely isolated. Anicilia told him to be proud, said that from now on Cyan would always be compared to Eugene. First they would talk about how he lost the duel, then they would make jokes about someone from the main family being defeated at the ceremony. He would have no choice but to feel ashamed, but she told him not to despair. Even if people mocked him, he was a direct descendant of the Lionheart family. She stated that Eugene could never be the head of the family, but he still had many things to offer. That's why she said Cyan needed to work hard and give his all. She recommended that he befriend Eugene. Cyan asked if it was just because now they were brothers. Anicilia confirmed that yes, that was exactly why, and said they should become good brothers, because that would help him someday. Cyan wondered how he could be friends with that guy. Kyle, on the other hand, was more cheerful. She went up to Eugene saying that now they were siblings, right? And asked if she could call him Big Sister. Eugene replied that it didn't make sense, since they weren't real siblings, and Besides, why would he call her big sister if she was only a few months older than him? Cyan replied that it was the same reason she became the youngest in the family, even though she was born only 5 seconds later. Eugene retorted, saying that was totally different. Cyan kept insisting that Eugene call her big sister, pleading just once, please, just once, repeating herself several times, but Eugene thought he would rather die than call a 13-year-old girl big sister. Meanwhile, Lobarian was explaining that he couldn't guarantee taking Iode as his disciple at the Red Tower, which specialized in summoning magic. First, Iode would have to pass an aptitude test in Aroth. Iode asked what would happen if he passed, and Lobarian replied that it would be great, but that his status as a member of the Lionheart family wouldn't help much unless he had enough talent to surpass other mages. If he didn't, Lobarian wouldn't be able to take him as a disciple. However, before becoming a Tower Master, Lobarian had been a longtime friend of Gilad, so he would protect Iode from criticism and accusations of favoritism, and still offer a good place to train magic according to his aptitude. Iode got excited about that possibility. He thought that even if he didn't become Lobarian's direct disciple, it could be amazing to leave that oppressive family and learn the magic he loves so much. He looked at his father, and Gilad said he didn't need to worry about his opinion. He should just choose what he truly wanted. But then Iode's mother, Theones, appeared, saying that this was an opportunity given by his father and that he should accept it gratefully. She acknowledged that her son's interest in magic had always been greater than his interest in swords, but still reminded him that he was her son and was destined to be the head of the family, so he shouldn't forget that. The head of the family nearly scolded Theones, but she said she was only encouraging him as a good mother. Deep down, Theones imagined Anicilia celebrating once she found out that Iode was going to Aroth, but she herself had no other choice. Iode wasn't born with enough talent to represent the legitimate bloodline. He was weak and naive by nature, so it would be better for him to meet other mages, grow stronger, and form connections that would help him in the future. She thought that, as a legitimate son of the Lionheart family, this was the best path for him. The day after the banquet, Iode departed with Lobarian for Aroth. The children from the other collateral lineages also returned to their homes with their parents. The only guests remaining were Eugene and Gerhardt. Eugene was about to learn mana for the first time since reincarnating into this life. Mana development was divided into 2 parts: breathing and physical training. Breathing consisted of gathering mana from the environment through inhalation, while physical training accumulated mana through bodily movement. Neither was easy, but breathing was far superior to physical training. In his past life, in Hamill's body, he had trained mana through physical exertion, but once he started using breathing after Vermouth and Sienna's advice, he noticed the huge difference it made. The Lionhearts trained mana through breathing, and now Eugene would have the chance to train directly with Cyan. It was explained that a spiritual vein was a place where the mana of the land concentrated. There was a spiritual vein deep in the forest of the main family estate, a place created by Vermouth himself 300 years ago, and it could only be accessed by family descendants. Cyan asked if Eugene was anxious, and he replied that he was more excited than anxious. Even so, Cyan warned that it wouldn't be easy. He also said that it's easier to feel mana the younger you are. He explained that Cyan and Sile learned mana when they were 6 years old and took 4 days. Iode, as he recalled, took a week. Children from collateral lineages usually learned mana around Eugene's current age and took at least a month to start sensing it. But Cyan didn't think Eugene would take that long, since he himself would help, and they would also use the spiritual vein. Cyan believed he could do it in 10 days. Eugene thought that 10 days was an exaggeration. He believed he would need only 10 minutes. They were heading toward a small cabin deep in the forest. Cyan looked inside the house, where there was a hidden basement, and inside it, a seal of the Lionheart family. Eugene sat in the center of that seal, ready to begin his training. The mana training method of the main family was a technique inherited directly from Vermouth himself, and there was a strict rule that collateral members could not inherit that original technique. For this reason, they used an inferior version called the Red Flame method. However, Cyan showed him the original technique, the one passed down through the main bloodline. He had accumulated so much power that he now used the White Flame method. Eugene didn't know the name of it, but he instantly recognized the form. He remembered the incredibly dense mana flowing through Vermouth's body, white flames that looked like a lion's mane. In his past life, he had never been able to surpass that flame. Cyan said that, since Eugene couldn't feel mana yet, he could start just with breathing, but Eugene replied that he was already feeling it. Jian thought he was just imagining things and wanted to test if that was true. Eugene, with his eyes closed, affirmed that he could indeed feel mana right beside him, right at that exact moment. He was truly sensing it, and when he asked how long Jian would keep up the process, he heard from him that this was madness. Jian thought Eugene was progressing way too fast, so he sat beside him and said that since Eugene was already beginning to feel mana, they could move forward. From that point on, Eugene shouldn't say another word, because he needed to focus completely on what was happening inside his body. Eugene closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to feel the flow of mana. He imagined himself breathing in mana along with the air, guiding it into his lungs and directing it toward his heart, exactly like the white flame method. While he was doing that, Jian stepped back a little and watched silently, impressed. Jian realized that Eugene was going beyond expectations, already refining mana within his body, even though he had just received his first dose. It was unbelievable. He thought that boy was completely insane. Meanwhile, Eugene kept sensing and breathing mana. Since he still had the memories of his past life, the process became less difficult. The most impressive thing was how easily his current body accepted the mana. With each breath, he was able to absorb more mana, but he soon reached his limit. His heart was full, and when he opened his eyes, he was sweating. Jian was surprised at the size of the mana core Eugene had created. Normally, someone would start with a much smaller core. He told the boy that he was a monster, and Eugene asked if that was a compliment. Jian replied that yes, it was a big compliment. As they walked back through the forest, Jian explained that the main difference between the red flame and white flame methods was in the core's ability to divide. No matter how much one trained using the red flame method, the number of cores in the body would be limited to just one. But with the white flame method, after a certain point, the core would split, allowing mana to be stored more efficiently. These split cores resonated with each other and amplified magical power. This stage was called the divided star core. The legendary Vermouth had reached 10 stars. In the history of the Lionheart family, only he had accomplished that. Jian said that both he and Gilad had 6 stars. Iode, Cyan, and Syl had only 1, and he didn't know much about Iode, but he said the twins would probably reach the 2nd star by next year. He explained that, having started learning mana at the age of 6, it took them about 8 years to go from the 1st to the 2nd star. When Jian asked if Eugene would be able to reach that level, he said that it would definitely be much faster, as long as he didn't slack off. Eugene replied that he would do his best, but he thought Jian was treating him like a fool. After all, he had reincarnated into a body far better than in his past life, and had even learned Vermouth's method. There was no way he would waste this body out of laziness. He didn't really know if he could reach 10 stars, but he should analyze the structure of the method while training. If there was anything unpleasant, he could adapt it to fit better. And in the end, he sincerely thanked dear Vermouth. Thanks to that method, there were many things Eugene would be able to accomplish in the future. When they returned to the main mansion, Jian said he would tell his brother everything and mentioned that Eugene must be tired and could rest. But Eugene would never do that because he knew that kind of fatigue would disappear after a good night's sleep. And since he had already gathered enough mana, there was still something important he needed to try. Soon after, Nina came running, calling for Eugene, and he asked her to bring Wynneth, which was in his room. Later, Eugene was training in the backyard with Nina watching. He still wasn't sure if the contract would work, but he was going to try anyway. He channeled mana into the blade, focusing, until suddenly a strong gust of wind hit Nina. A cyclone formed in the middle of the yard. A voice in the wind asked if he was really Hamill, and Eugene immediately recognized that voice. It was the elemental spirit king of wind, known as Tempest. The Wind King asked if Hamill had reincarnated, and Eugene wanted to know if he had recognized him. Tempest replied that yes, of course, since Hamill had been a companion of Vermouth, and no matter how much time passed or how many times his appearance changed, the soul would always remain the same. The spirit said it had been a long time since he was last summoned through Wynneth, and for a moment he thought it was some descendant of Vermouth trying to use it. But when he felt Hamill's soul, he was sure. Eugene then asked why that bastard Vermouth didn't kill the Demon Kings. He said Tempest should know, but the Wind King answered that he truly didn't know Vermouth's plans. In the battle against the Demon King of Imprisonment, Vermouth had sheathed his sword and didn't land the final blow. Eugene was shocked and asked him to explain better. Tempest explained that the fight had taken place in the Demon King's castle. It was a difficult battle, but ended in an absurd way. In the end, only Vermouth and the Demon King remained standing, but Vermouth simply sheathed his sword and didn't kill him, and he didn't go on to fight the Demon King of the Apocalypse either. Eugene was outraged, asked if that was a joke, and questioned if the deal Vermouth made with the Demon Kings was real. Tempest replied that he didn't know the content of that agreement, because only those present at the time would know. After Vermouth sheathed his sword, nothing else could be done. Eugene said that everyone else was unconscious at that time, except Vermouth and the Demon King, and wondered what exactly he had done. He said he wanted to reach Vermouth's dead body and ask him directly, but Tempest explained that there was no time, that normally he couldn't even be summoned, but he had forced this opening just to see him again. He also said that next time he could only be summoned when Eugene was strong enough. Eugene, exhausted, replied angrily, calling the spirit a bastard, but then lost all strength and collapsed face first onto the ground, unconscious. Later, he woke up in his bed with a severe headache. He figured it was mana exhaustion, since he had used up everything he had gathered. He knew elemental spirits recognized people by their souls, and that was why Tempest had called him Hamill. For some time, Eugene had doubted whether he was truly the reincarnation of Hamill, thinking he might just be someone with his memories. But now, there was no doubt left. He really was Hamill, with memories from 300 years ago. Nina showed up to check on him and asked if he was feeling well. Eugene said he was, and wanted to know how long he had been unconscious. Nina said it was about half a day. Eugene apologized for worrying her, and Nina said the head of the family and Gian were there to see him. Shortly after, the two of them entered the room. Gillard said he had heard the whole story from Nina, including the windstorm that occurred when Eugene picked up Wynneth, and wanted to know if he had really managed to summon an elemental. Eugene thought that a storm that size had probably been seen by many people, so he couldn't reveal everything to the others, only a few small details. He said that the Wind Elemental King had appeared, which left everyone shocked. He explained that the king only appeared to see who he was, since it had been a long time since he was last summoned. Gian asked if that was true, because no one from the family had summoned the Elemental King since Vermouth himself, and Eugene confirmed. He said the Wind King told him he was not strong enough yet and hoped to see him again when he was more grown. Gillard remarked that Eugene really was a fascinating child. He said Gian had explained everything that happened in the spiritual world, said Eugene had sensed mana at the right time, and formed a core with the white flame method, which was already amazing on its own. Even so, he managed to draw the attention of the Elemental King. They suggested he rest for a few days. Gian said they would continue the lessons later and that he had even planned to go out and train, but thought it was more important to develop Eugene's talent now. Eugene thanked them but said he didn't want to take up their time. Gian told him not to worry, that he wanted to teach him soon, and that he was also teaching the twins. The head of the family would help too. Gillard thought he hoped his twin children would use Eugene as inspiration. At that moment, they were about to duel. Sile asked if Cyan had heard that Eugene's white flame method had already reached 1 star, and mentioned that it had taken them a long time to get their first star. Cyan said it hadn't been that long, and they said 1 month was already among the shortest times in the family's history, but Eugene had achieved it in a single day. Then the duel began. Eugene was only pretending to rest. He wondered if everyone had already left, then picked up Wynneth, used mana, and summoned wind spirits. He could only summon a lesser elemental, the Sylph, which was the most his mana allowed. Eugene asked if she had heard anything from her king, but the Sylph couldn't answer, since she couldn't even speak due to her very low intelligence. Even so, Eugene threatened her, telling her to let the storm know that if he was lying, he was going to beat him up. The Sylph understood the message and returned to the spiritual realm. Hamill had been the only one to die in the castle of the Demon King of Confinement, and the only ones who knew the content of the pact were Vermouth and the Demon King. One day Eugene would need to go to Helmuth, not only there, but also to Aroth, Eurus, and Luhar. If he went to those places, finding out what had happened to his old companions would also be good, but for now he couldn't. His young body couldn't handle such a long journey, but one day it would. Looking at himself in the mirror, Eugene said that time really flies. He was now Eugene Lionheart, 4 years later, and 17 years old. He thought his body was good enough. He trained mana every single day without stopping and was close to reaching 3 stars with the white flame method, but something was still missing to use all his power with this body. He needed to go beyond what he had learned in his past life. He said maybe he should go to Aroth to study magic. Cyan asked what he was talking about. Eugene explained that in the morning he had been training the white flame method and managed to make his cores rotate as if they were in orbit, accumulating so much white flame that Cyan was speechless. He asked how that was possible since he started training mana 7 years after Eugene and had only recently reached 3 stars, while Cyan was still at the 2nd. Eugene said that everything had a reason. He was a genius. Sen said he was going to kill him since he got beaten up every morning by Eugene, but Eugene answered that he was always the one asking for duels. If you don't want it, then don't ask. He didn't care. Cyan asked why he was talking about magic now, after spending so much time training with a sword. He brought up what happened to Iode after going to Aroth to study magic. Even after the succession ceremony, Iode's talent enrollment wasn't enough to become Loberian's disciple. Although he entered the Red Tower, he hadn't achieved much even after 4 years. He just wandered around the tower doing nothing. Eugene said he was talking about his older brother. The Lord told him not to act like a know-it-all, saying he would learn magic and stay in the main house. If he went to Aroth, Cyan would be sad. Eugene asked if it was really her who would be sad and lonely. He said good for her. Eugene was going to meet the head of the family. If he talked about reaching 3 stars, maybe he could get permission to leave a little earlier. Of course, Cyan was extremely upset, not understanding why Eugene was suddenly talking about learning magic. Later, Gilead was quite shocked to hear that Eugene wanted to study magic in Aroth. He commented that no one had ever reached the 3rd star of the White Flame method at his age, and that if he kept training, he might even reach the 4th star. Eugene said he noticed something as soon as he reached the 3rd star. If he kept doing the same things as before, he might not evolve much. He wanted to learn new things, and even though he didn't know if he had talent for magic, he believed that being introduced to it now could help him see mana from a new perspective. Learning something completely different would be a valuable experience, and he was sure it wouldn't be in vain. That was the request he made to the head of the family. Gilead reflected, looked at him closely, and asked him to lift his head. As head of the family, he could grant Eugene's wish to study. He said he understood his intentions, but Eugene needed to promise one thing. He could not study dark magic. Aroth had the Black Tower, where dark mages gathered. Unlike the past, there were no longer any dangerous rumors, and public perception of them was no longer as negative. Still, the Lionhearts were descendants of the great Vermouth, and it was a family tradition to oppose dark magic. Eugene thought he knew very well the terrible things those mages had done 300 years ago. He said Gilead didn't need to worry, because he also hated dark magic. After that, while walking through the halls, he heard a strange noise, a knock on the door. Someone was asking to talk for a bit. Eugene told them to leave, but the voice replied that she couldn't. She was sweaty from training and didn't want to come out like that. She asked if he was really going to Aroth. Eugene asked if Cyan had told her, and Cyan said yes, and that he had reached the 3rd star. She wanted to know why he was going there just to learn magic, since he already had elemental spirits. She said he didn't need to go to Aroth, just to bring back a mage from the capital. She also mentioned that while he was away, her and Cyan's skills would catch up to his. Eugene said that would be great, so they could have fun during duels. It had been a long time since he dueled her. Cyan asked if he would cancel his trip to Aroth if she started dueling him. Eugene replied that he would still go. She asked how long he would be gone, and Eugene said he would find out once he got there, but it would be a few years. Kyle was surprised by the length of time and said that things get really hard when you leave home. She also asked about Sir Gerhardt, and Eugene said his father would be fine without him. He had already gotten used to life in the main house, was hunting regularly, and had lost a lot of weight. Cyan said that Uncle Gian would also be sad, and mentioned that when Cyan talked about it, it seemed like he didn't want Eugene to go either. Even so, he said he would leave and told everyone to train hard. Cyan finally opened the door, and as he walked down the corridor, she asked again if he was really going. Eugene just waved his hand, and Cyan called him an idiot. She didn't want him to go either. At another time, talking with his father, Gerhardt gave him some advice not to hang around the wrong people and not to be lazy with his studies. Eugene told his father to keep exercising while he was away, so he wouldn't get that belly back. Gerhardt said his son was already taller than him and wished him a great journey. Later, during the farewell at the teleportation portal, Gilead asked if he really didn't need any guards, but Eugene had full confidence that he could protect himself. Gilead agreed, since he had now reached the 3rd star. Everyone had gathered for the farewell, forming a small party. Eugene's father was crying a lot, and Eugene asked him to stop crying for God's sake. He said he wasn't going to stay just because he was there crying like a big baby. Since he had to leave anyway, he asked him to say goodbye with a smile. Gerhardt realized his son was right, so he smiled at him. Eugene promised he would come back one day and set off toward the capital of the magical kingdom of Aroth. The place was called the Pentagon, where the 5 magic towers formed a large pentagram around the palace. Flying carriages and all kinds of magical technology passed through the sky. Eugene thought he had been there in his past life as Hamill, but the scenery had changed a lot. The station floated, and even among the magical kingdoms, only Aroth had a teleportation portal in the sky. The station was sustained by countless spells, showing just how excellent Aroth's magic was, as well as reinforcing the commercial value and convenience of the place. The guide accompanying him commented that the scenery could be considered a cultural treasure of Aroth. He explained that the Pentagon had more than 15 floating stations, all created by Sienna. Eugene said even the floating carriage had been her idea. The guide confirmed and reassured Eugene, saying that even though the technology was over 100 years old, the accident rate was very low. Eugene thought that even so, it still wasn't zero. Before visiting the tourist spots, Eugene said he wanted to go to the mansion of the wise Sienna. The guide said it was a great choice. When people came to the Pentagon, most visited three main places: the mansion, the magic tower, and the night view. He explained that 300 years ago, after returning from the demon realm, Sienna became the youngest master of a magic tower upon arriving in Aroth. Because of that, there was a bronze statue of her likeness in the plaza of the Green Magic Tower. The mansion was where Sienna lived until the end of her life. About 200 years ago, she left the mansion with a letter of retirement. Eugene asked if no one knew where she went after that. The guide explained that many mages from Aroth and Sienna's disciples had tried to track her down, but no one had been able to find her. The saddest part, he said, was that she disappeared on her own birthday. The guide said he had a theory. He believed she went toward the demon realm of Helmuth, because it was on that same day 200 years ago, when she turned 100, that she left behind the body of Hamill, the fool, and returned to the demon realm. She remembered her fallen companion every day and perhaps wanted revenge for him. Maybe that was why Sienna left. The guide said Eugene probably knew about that too, and claimed that Hamill had been completely in love with Sienna, even confessing his love for her at the end. Eugene told him to stop saying that kind of nonsense. The guide didn't understand and asked what was wrong, but Eugene pretended it was nothing. The guide laughed and said it seemed like he didn't like the idea of that romance. He said there were other theories about her disappearance, including a popular one that Sienna hated dark magic and demons. She opposed the construction of the Black Magic Tower up until the day she retired. Some believed that radical dark mages who wanted the tower built had killed her. Eugene denied it, saying there was no way a dark mage could have killed Sienna, that it was impossible. The guide agreed. He said that at the time, the Black Tower strongly insisted on the assassination theory, but Eugene knew that Sienna would never die at the hands of a dark mage. He thought that maybe, yes, at the hands of a demon king, Helmuth might still be influencing Aroth through the Black Tower. In that case, the demonic exes might have found Sienna annoying enough to want her dead. They finally arrived at Sienna's mansion. Eugene wondered where she had really died. Meanwhile, there were mages praying in front of the mansion. They were praying to pass the tower tests and asking for luck. Eugene commented that there were a lot of people there. The guide explained they were students about to take the recruitment test for the magic tower. But since they had no money, they wouldn't be able to enter. The entrance fee for the mansion already cost thousands and only gave access to the garden. Those who wanted to enter the actual building had to pay much more. Eugene asked why it was so expensive to enter the mansion, and the guide explained that it was because there were people willing to pay. There was a superstition that if someone prayed in front of Sienna's portrait, which hung in the mansion's main hall, they would be guaranteed success in the recruitment test. So Eugene presented his Lionheart family card, and the guards quickly let him in. The guide said he would wait by the door and that Eugene could take his time exploring. Inside alone, Eugene wanted to see how that woman had lived. Sienna's mansion was enormous. It was said that she lived there for centuries. Hamill remembered a conversation with Sienna when she asked what he would do once everything was over. Hamill, confused, asked why she was asking that. Sienna explained that they were all out there at the end of the world, at an age when they should be enjoying life. She asked if, when everything ended, he wouldn't want to live differently. Hamill replied that, honestly, he had never thought about it. Sienna said that Malone, the idiot, said he wanted to become a king, and Hamill thought it was absurd to believe you could be king just because you wanted to. But Sienna replied that, at the very least, they could all dream. Embarrassed, Hamill asked if she was drunk, and his hands trembled with shame. Sienna said she was being serious, and Hamill asked what she wanted to do when it was all over. She hesitated, unsure. After thinking for a bit, she said she wanted something normal, like getting married and having children, and that she wanted to become a grandma. Eugene thought she should have found a good man, married, and grown old in peace, but instead, she spent a century alone in that mansion. When he approached the portrait to touch it, a guard appeared, saying it was forbidden. Eugene thought he was getting too sentimental, but reminded himself he wasn't there to look at a portrait. He knew there was a study room in the mansion's basement, and that access was allowed. The place was elegant, with shelves full of books and magical tomes. He imagined there might be some clue left behind by Sienna, but the same guard appeared again, saying it was forbidden to touch. Eugene replied that he had already understood. He thought that if he couldn't open the books, he would have to limit himself to analyzing the titles, trying to find something interesting. He then remembered his necklace, stored in the magical treasure vault, whose memory had been overwritten. Eugene connected with it and wondered if all this was coincidence, or if he had been searching too much. The idea that the necklace reacted to his soul, just like the storm, reinforced the possibility that someone was directly interfering in his current life. If Sienna was the one who did it, he would find find out. Later, he returned to the portrait. He looked again at the study room, the bedrooms, and all the other rooms, but nothing caught his attention. He truly didn't know what to do. He said out loud that if Sienna wanted something, she should say it clearly. Then he raised his middle finger to the portrait, saying that if she was angry, she should come speak to him in person. But since nothing happened, he muttered that she could only do that if she were still alive. It was already night when the guide commented that Eugene's visit had been longer than expected. He said he didn't imagine he would have to wait until sunset. Eugene gave a generous tip, a gold coin, and the guide asked where he was going next. He said that since they were in a tourist spot, there was a great restaurant nearby, but Eugene replied that he wanted to go straight to the Red Magic Tower. After that, he wouldn't need the guide anymore. Later in the flying carriage, Eugene asked if the guide knew Iode Eugene Lionheart, his older brother. The guide replied that among the young mages of the Pentagon, there was no one who didn't know him. Eugene said that he had duties with the Red Magic Tower and had been in Aroth for 4 years. He asked if the guide knew anything about him. Since he was adopted, Eugene had never managed to speak with Iode again, not even once. He thought it might be good to know something before meeting him again, to avoid embarrassment. He promised he wouldn't tell anyone the guide was the one who told him, and said all he wanted were just rumors. The guide accepted, warning that he didn't know everything, but shared a common rumor about Iode. They said he left the Magic Tower every night to indulge in pleasures and fun. Eugene thought that made sense. After all, Iode must be 19 years old by now. The guide explained it wasn't the kind of fun he was imagining, as Iode went out to have fun with a succubus. Eugene sarcastically asked what that was supposed to mean and criticized, saying that not even in Helmuth did such things exist. So why was Iode involved with a succubus? The guide replied that even so, a dark magic tower had appeared in the city, and that it wasn't only humans practicing magic there, but demons too. Eugene reflected and concluded that Iode, his brother, must be involved in some shady dealings with the succubus from the dark tower. The guide suggested it might be something like a service, explaining that other cities also dealt with it, as if it were a necessary evil. He said there was a street known for its black market, with impure shops where several succubi acted as hostesses, and that Iode used to frequent that area. Eugene asked if he knew where it was, and the guide confirmed, saying the place was called Bolero Street, but that it didn't open every day. It only operated on full moon nights, when it transformed into what was called the Street of Sin. Eugene didn't want to have a good relationship with Iode, but after hearing that, he was even more outraged. As a descendant of Vermouth, he found it unacceptable that the eldest son of the main house was wandering around with a demon. The guide asked him to keep it secret, and Eugene replied that of course he wouldn't tell anyone, but swore that if he ever had proof or a witness, he would beat that kid to a pulp. With the full moon night and Bolero Street approaching, Eugene was later received at the Red Magic Tower. A mage introduced herself as Era, explaining that the Tower Master was on the upper floor and intended to meet him, but something unexpected happened. An explosion suddenly burst one of the windows. Eugene asked if it had been an accident, and Era replied that, as he already knew, the Red Tower specialized in summoning magic, and that kind of magic had a high failure rate. Small demons began flying out the window, but red magical hands appeared and crushed them. It was Lobarian who was dealing with the situation. He commented that, although everyone there was talented, they had no idea what they were doing by trying to summon a dark beast using a lava shark summoning circle. Lobarian complained about the scale of the disaster it would have been if he hadn't contained those demons, since they had no emotions and acted purely on destructive instinct, which meant they could have started killing people. So he ordered everyone to gather their things and leave the place. That was when he noticed Eugene there and came down to greet him, saying it had been a long time and he barely recognized him. Eugene replied that, on the other hand, Lobarian didn't seem to have changed at all. Lobarian said he was maintaining his youth through magic, but Eugene thought he looked a bit different compared to 4 years ago. Now that he had trained his own mana, he could clearly sense Lobarian's power. Although he didn't compare to Sienna, Lobarian had more than enough qualifications to be the master of a tower. Lobarian said he had heard from Gilad that Eugene was interested in magic. Eugene confirmed, saying that magic was an attractive art, though difficult to learn. That was when he noticed someone approaching the door. It was the skinny Iode Lionheart, and Eugene thought it was obvious to anyone that his essence had been drained by a succubus. Lobarian asked why Iode wasn't greeting his own brother, and Iode replied that he didn't really know what to say. Eugene, with a deadly stare, simply said it was good to see him again. Lobarian asked what he was waiting for, and said that if he was done, he should go back. So Iode closed the door and returned inside the tower. Lobarian apologized for the incident, and commented that he had heard from Gilad that Eugene didn't want to learn magic directly from him. Eugene explained that he didn't want to cause trouble for the Tower Master, and besides, if he learned from him, many from the Lionheart family family might become displeased. That's why he preferred to learn magic on his own. Liberian accepted that, saying it was fine, and that if Eugene had any questions, he could ask Hera. He also said Eugene could stay at the Red Tower while he was in Aroth. Even though the lodging wasn't as luxurious as the mansion he had lived in, it was still enough. Eugene then asked if he would have access to the library. Then a month passed since Eugene arrived at the tower. Every day he went to the library, where he read magical texts from dawn until sunset, then returned to his room and stayed up late at night. Of course, he also trained in other things besides magic. He spent a few hours in the morning refining his mana before heading to the library. And at night, he exercised his body until he was completely covered in sweat. He slept less, but his body was able to recover from all fatigue with just a few hours of sleep. By that time, Eugene had already read all the introductory books in the tower's library, and now he wanted to test something. It was explained that 300 years ago, Sienna divided the stages of magic into clearer levels. That was originally her unique style, but once she became the master of the Green Tower, many mages started casting spells using her methodology based on circles. A rotating mana ring is used to form magic, and when the mana surpasses the limit of a single circle, another circle forms. Nowadays, most mages learn magic using circles, and only those who follow completely different foundations, like elemental or dark magic, do not use this method. Later, Eugene went to meet Hera and asked if she used circles. Hera replied that yes, although there were other methods, the use of circles had proven to be the most efficient over the past 300 years. But Eugene explained that he wanted to add his own touch. Hera said she didn't recommend modifying the foundation of the circles, and asked him to elaborate on his idea. Eugene answered that he wanted to use the Lionheart mana method inside the circle. Hera explained that the mana used in martial arts was quite different from magic, and unless the magic was properly formed and activated, it wouldn't work. She thought that if the mana spiral went out of control, Eugene could be seriously injured or even die. Eugene said that was exactly why he wanted to test it. He thought he had read all the introductory books in the tower to prepare for this. Hera felt Eugene was a bit immature. After all, he was only 17 years old and wouldn't accept a no without seeing for himself. So she allowed the test, but said she would stay ready to intervene in case of emergency. If something dangerous happened, she would step in, because if he got hurt, she would have problems with the Tower Master. Eugene then gathered his white flame and began the process. The white flame method and the circles might seem different, but they were similar in essence. The white flame method controlled mana through stars concentrated in the heart, while the circles did so through rings formed around the same point. Replacing circles with stars could amplify the amount of mana used. Eugene adjusted the mana as needed, but he wasn't sure what might happen. Hera was completely fascinated. She noticed that Eugene was perfectly controlling a huge amount of mana that would normally have dispersed, but he kept everything stable. Then he formed a fireball in the palm of his hand and slowly transformed it into a magic missile. Hera realized he had cast it without any chant, relying only on calculations and magical conversion without letting the energy scatter. Eugene thought it wasn't bad at all for a first attempt and asked if he could summon a monster to test it. Hera suggested a small golem. She said it would be a dwarf golem made of cabrium with no defensive enchantments, but strong enough that almost no physical attack could pierce it. Eugene thought it was perfect for the test and fired the concentrated magic missile directly at the golem's chest, which cracked on impact. He caused significant damage. Later, Loberian arrived and saw the result. He asked if Eugene had really created circles and used the white flame method to successfully cast a spell. Hera confirmed, saying that the density and purity of Eugene's mana were impressive, and that the absolute power of his offensive spell had surpassed that of a third circle mage. Loberian thought that kind of talent was monstrous. Replacing circles with a martial method of mana control was terrifying. Eugene had 3 stars in the white flame method, which meant he had turned those 3 stars into 3 magical circles. Hera mentioned that Eugene had already left the tower, as he had an appointment in the morning. Loberian then asked if it would be unfair to write a letter of recommendation so that Eugene could be accepted into Acreon. Hera asked if the Royal Library of Acreon was really restricted to high-class mages and nobles. Loberian replied that Eugene was already a noble, and as for the other category, maybe he qualified as well. He commented that Eugene had spent just 1 month reading introductory books and was already using third circle magic with the white flame method, being able to pierce the armor of a cabrium golem. He said he would write a letter of recommendation because someone like Eugene deserved treatment worthy of his talent. Hera noted that other mages might feel a little unfairly treated because of that, but Loberian said that anyone who couldn't accept it was simply blinded by envy. Then he asked if if Eugene had said where he was going and what he needed to do. Hera replied that he was going out with a friend, which left Liberian a bit confused. Later, at Melon Square, where there was a large statue of the sage Sienna, Eugene thought the statue matched reality, as she always smiled like that when creating a new spell. That was when he met up with his friend, who happened to be Gargis, and just his appearance left Eugene completely shocked. Gargis was absolutely jacked, and Eugene wondered how an 18-year-old could have such a massive beard. Gargis commented that Eugene had grown, not as much as him, but the one who was really big here was himself. When he shook Eugene's hand, he said that just by the grip, he could tell Eugene had trained a lot over the past 4 years. But even so, it still wasn't enough. That's why he brought his special muscle growth formula. Eugene declined, and Gargis asked why. He explained that Eugene's own father had only managed to slim down and gain muscle thanks to the help of that formula, so he should know better than anyone. Eugene replied that it was fine for his father to use it, but asked him to stop pushing that stuff on him, using his father as an excuse. Then he asked why Gargis wanted to meet with him. Gargis said he wasn't just there to deliver the formula, he also wanted to go to Bolero Street. He had heard that the testicles of a giant would be up for auction that night. Eugene was confused and asked if he really meant testicles. Gargis confirmed, saying yes, a giant's balls. He explained that giant testicles had great magical value and that he planned to bring them to a well-known alchemist in Aroth to create a physical enhancement. He said Eugene could come along as he didn't have enough money at the moment. Eugene asked if he was asking for a loan, and Gargis smiled, requesting the money. Eugene said fine, but asked him to stop embarrassing people around them. Gargis promised to pay it back and said the auction wouldn't only have testicles, there would be many valuable items there. He asked if Eugene wasn't interested and said maybe with Wynneth, he didn't need that kind of stuff. But Eugene said he was more interested in other parts of Bolero Street that weren't the auction. He recalled having crossed paths with Iode a few days earlier in the tower's hallway, and it seemed like he was in withdrawal, suffering from no longer being able to see the succubus. Without a doubt, Iode would go to Bolero Street on the next full moon. Later, when he returned to the tower, Eugene was summoned by Lobarian, but that was fine, as he had something to ask about Iode anyway. Lobarian welcomed him back and said he could make himself comfortable. The two sat down at the table to talk, but Lobarian didn't explain why he had called him. Instead, he simply handed him a scroll imbued with magic and asked him to take a look. Eugene realized it was a letter of recommendation to Acreon, the royal library of Aroth, where the essence of the kingdom's magic was stored, a place famous for over 300 years. Even though the magic towers had many books, none of them compared to the quality of Acreon's Diacreon. Eugene thought the best thing to do was to be humble, and said he wasn't ready to deal with something like that yet. Lobarian disagreed, saying that he was ready, and that this was the perfect time to gain access to Acreon. Since he hadn't delved too deep into magic yet, many doors were still open for him. Maybe he wouldn't understand all the texts now, but even just memorizing the content would greatly expand his knowledge. Knowledge that one day would become the foundation of Eugene's magical development. He thought that Acreon might contain magic from the ancient era, or even texts from sages who were the greatest of their time. Then he asked if there were studies by Sienna there. Lobarian said of course there were. The red and green towers had books by the sage Sienna, but Acreon had something even more special. The original book called The Sorcery, divided into 3 volumes. In it, Sienna compiled all her secrets from her final years. The Sorcery is considered the greatest book in Aroth's history, and no copies were ever made. Only the first volume is available for reading, but even that alone is enough for a mage to discard many other useless books. Lobarian said that when he read the first volume of The Sorcery, he realized that everything he had learned about magic up to that point felt like child's play. He explained that the letter of recommendation he had in his hands didn't guarantee Eugene's entry to Acreon, but he wanted to know his opinion before sending it. Eugene thought it was obviously true, and wondered why he was still asking for permission. Even so, he replied humbly, saying he would be very grateful, but that he was concerned his lack of skill might be a problem. Lobarian assured him that would not be an obstacle. Eugene just wanted to make sure Lobarian wouldn't use this against him in the future, because he knew it wasn't easy to find a tower master who wasn't petty. But before changing the subject, he wanted to ask something about Iode. He said he had heard since arriving in Aroth that Iode wasn't studying magic, but instead spending his time with a succubus on Bolero Street. Lobarian's reaction was one of surprise, which to Eugene was a clear sign that he already knew about Iode's behavior. Lobarian admitted it was true that he had tried to warn Iode many times, but was never able to stop him. In the past, many people had died because of succubi, having their essence drained. But when Helmuth opened its borders, the demons completely changed their attitudes. This also applied to succubi. They still drained people's essence, but no longer killed anyone, because the Queen of Nightmares from Helmuth had forbidden it. Even so, Eugene said that didn't justify his brother's actions. Lobarian asked him to try to consider Iode's point of view, who had arrived at the tower tower 4 years earlier with high expectations, but his talent didn't match what was expected of him. He faced many hardships, received help, but reached a point where he could no longer progress. Iode couldn't handle the expectations that came with his family name. The pressure only grew. He thought relieving his stress that way wouldn't do any harm, but was warned not to get addicted, because Lobarian knew very well what could happen. Eugene wasn't insensitive. He knew what it was like to live for 4 years in the Lionheart family's main house, dealing with hot-tempered people like Tiones and manipulators like Anicilia, both talented and ambitious. Iode had always felt pressured by that. The reason he stayed at the Magic Tower, even while being mocked, was that it was still better than going back home. Eugene knew Iode had a sad story, but he thought relieving stress that way wasn't acceptable. Even if demons could smile nowadays, they were still demons. They would never truly mix with humans. He needed to see with his own eyes what that succubus was doing to Iode. Later, on the night of the full moon, Eugene and Gargis were on Bolero Street, but they were in disguise. Gargis asked why they were using a magical disguise, and Eugene replied that it would be a scandal if 2 more Lionhearts were seen on that street. It would damage the family's image. Gargis agreed. That's when the guide contacted Eugene through a magical communication device, asking if he had already arrived. The guide explained that the communicator only worked inside Bolero Street and would signal as soon as Iode was found. Eugene asked if Iode wouldn't also be magically disguised, but the guide answered no. He never used disguise magic and still wore the same clothes as always, so he wouldn't be hard to spot. Eugene grew more and more disappointed with Iode, thinking that this behavior was pathetic. Gargis asked if Eugene had other matters there, but Eugene replied that he would handle this one alone. First, they went to the auction. Bolero Street had numerous auctions, but they all followed the same rule: blind bids. Each group stayed in a separate room, without seeing who else was participating. The person explaining the rules said there were 3 buttons in the room. The middle button was to place a bid, the right one to increase the bid, and the left in case assistance was needed. So Eugene and Gargis stayed together in one of these rooms, waiting for the auction to start. Gargis thought Eugene didn't like that sort of thing, but Eugene replied that he needed something to pass the time, and was also curious to see what would happen. Then the magic hologram appeared, broadcasting the auction. The auctioneer thanked everyone for attending and explained that the event would mostly deal with rare magical materials, especially those coming directly from Helmuth, which were of the highest quality. The first item presented was the Horn of Balarex, with an opening bid of 10 million. After that, the next items were the Proxia fruit, Mandrake root, and Uzurok flower. Eugene asked if he was sure the testicles would be there, and Gargis assured him they would since his source was reliable. The auctioneer then announced the next item, a metal even they couldn't identify, something no one had purchased so far, but which might catch someone's interest. This metal had been found in the Khazard region and emitted a beautiful glow when exposed to moonlight. It was so durable they couldn't reshape it or make it accept any kind of mana. The auctioneer said that even so, it could serve as a beautiful decoration, and the glow it emitted was impressive, so he would start the bidding at 1 million. As soon as he saw it, Eugene hit the button to participate and placed his bid of 1 million. He had never imagined he would find that thing there, for it was the missing sword, destruction given form, a weapon that had not been described in any history since then, the Moonlight Sword. That metal was a fragment of it. When Eugene brought the item home, Gargis asked why he had taken something so useless, but now that Eugene was holding the fragment, he was certain it was indeed part of the Moonlight Sword. The place where the fragment had been found, Khazard, was the very place the Moonlight Sword had once been discovered in his previous life. Maybe Vermouth had returned the sword to its original location because it was extremely dangerous. The cursed sword had never accepted anyone besides Vermouth as its wielder, and wherever it passed, it brought destruction. Perhaps Vermouth had broken the sword into pieces to prevent it from being used again. Jay thought that maybe some energy remained within it, but it was only a useless fragment that no longer carried the same sinister feeling it had 300 years ago. Then the guide called, informing them that Iode had appeared, and Eugene said he was leaving, giving his card to Gargis, and asking him to use it wisely, only to buy the testicles. Guided by the informant, Eugene headed toward the northern area of the street and found a shop named Rafflesia. The guards asked if he was a customer, and Eugene thought those damn demons were right in front of him. It was the first time he had seen them since his reincarnation. If it had been in his previous life, he would have killed both without a second thought. He said he just wanted to take a quick look inside, and the guard explained that the entry fee was 2 million, asking if he would still go in. Eugene showed the money and entered. Inside, the place was a bar full of succubi in short skirts, but he didn't find the one he was actually looking for, Iode. He asked the waitress where he could go to dream, and the succubus asked if he was in such a rush and if it was his first time there. She said the dreams were in the rooms downstairs, but suggested he have a drink first. Eugene replied that he had already drunk enough and would go there now. The succubus teased him, asking if he was embarrassed about what he wanted, then suggested they go to the room first. Going down the stairs, Eugene commented that the place was really creepy, that it was the first time he had seen anything like it. But the succubus told the cutie to relax, that soon he would receive the essence. But Eugene already knew the kind of hallway he was in and was prepared. He said he would sleep at home, so he would only pay for the drinks and didn't need any change. The succubus, confused, thought something was off about that guy. But even so, she led him to the exit through a corridor that went directly to the restaurant. At the restaurant, Eugene ordered the best dish they had, with lots of meat, and was devouring a real feast when he finally spotted the wretched Iode, who was being helped by two demons. Eugene thought that bastard, the Lionheart family's firstborn, had not only been seduced by a succubus, but couldn't even walk without help. They were taking him somewhere else, so Eugene dropped his food and started following them. They went into a dark and very suspicious alley, but before he could continue, Eugene was stopped by other people. One of the guards told him not to interfere where he wasn't called, but Eugene firmly asked who exactly had been called there. The man tried to strangle Eugene, but Eugene didn't even flinch, because in the next second, the guy had already been punched in the chin and fell immediately. The other two came at him, one with a knife and the other with a sword, trying to attack at the same time, but Eugene dodged effortlessly and struck them before they could even see his movements. He wondered what kind of place that was, but the three were already unconscious. He kicked one of them just to be sure, and decided it would be faster to find out everything on his own. Eugene went straight ahead, broke down the door, and upon entering, sensed some kind of smoke lingering in the air. He wondered if Iode had started using drugs too, which would be a sudden change. One of the people inside the room asked who he was, and he replied that they should have left guards outside. Eugene saw a beastman, a demon, and a human huddled in a corner getting high, and he sarcastically commented that this was what was supposed to bring world peace. After these provocations, they naturally retaliated with magic missiles, but Eugene easily took them all down. He asked where Iode was, but since no one answered, he drew his sword and warned them that he would kill them and find Iode on his own. In truth, he didn't attack them directly. The first thing he did was imbue his blade with mana and invoke the elemental power of wind, breaking everything around him. He realized Iode wasn't in any of the rooms on the first or second floor, which meant he could only be on the third. Eugene used magic missiles to break open the path and floated up to the third floor with the power of wind. On the third floor, there was only one room, and Eugene was certain that Iode was inside. From that room, he felt a very dark presence and already knew what was coming. When a storm of dark magic erupted, Eugene defended himself using the fragment of the Moonlight Sword. He thought the fragment worked very well, even incomplete, because the Moonlight Sword had always possessed the ability to repel any mana. Then Eugene asked if that was dark magic, but the dark mage was in shock and wondered how that was possible, since it should have killed him. Eugene recalled what Gilead always said, that none of his children should ever learn dark magic, but even so, his own biological son, a direct descendant of Vermouth, had done exactly that. When Eugene concentrated the power of the white flame, the dark mage immediately recognized it, the white flame that burned like a lion's mane. At that moment, the two demons carrying Iode appeared, clearly sent to deal with Eugene. They prepared for battle by sharpening their claws, but Eugene did not hesitate and simply charged forward. When both attacked at the same time, they were caught in the tornado summoned by Wynneth. One was seriously injured, and the other, even though scared, tried to strike with its claws, but ended up losing its hand in the process. Even so, Eugene didn't stop there. He grabbed the enemy and hurled it against the wall, ending the fight. Meanwhile, the magical disguise of the dark mage began to fade slowly, revealing that he knew exactly who he was facing. He recognized Eugene Lionheart, and upon seeing that he wasn't joking, he tried to justify his presence. Eugene told him to move aside, but the mage insisted, saying he would explain everything. Realizing he wouldn't be able to convince Eugene, he decided to use dark magic directly against him. However, Eugene didn't even move, calmly dodging it with his sword. The mage was in disbelief, thinking it was impossible. Just as he was about to die, Eugene placed the sword against his neck and threatened to cut off his head if he moved. At the same time, Iode was lying on a bed that seemed to be used for rituals. In front of him, there was a sacrificial chalice. Eugene, observing the scene, asked what was inside the chalice, and the dark mage replied that it contained unicorn hearts. Eugene immediately understood why, as unicorns possessed extremely high levels of mana and divine power, making them more valuable as sacrifices than even humans. Eugene asked if all of this was meant for a contract with a demon king, but the mage replied that he would never dare attempt attempt something like that. In fact, he was trying to make a contract with Baron Ulfar of Helmuth, an incubus serving Duchess Noir Zavella. When Eugene heard that name, he became irritated because he knew Noir Zavella well, the queen of succubi, and couldn't believe that woman was still alive. He knew Helmuth was ruled by demon kings, including the King of Confinement and the King of Calamity. Although Noir wasn't at their level, she was strong enough to be a duchess and cause great trouble. Eugene was outraged to realize that Iode had tried to forge a contract with a mere incubus, going so far as to sacrifice unicorn hearts, corrupt himself with drugs and alcohol to achieve it. The Dark Mage said that Iode was the one who wanted it, that he gave the money to buy the hearts, and that as a servant, he couldn't disobey orders. Eugene mocked him, saying it was easy to imagine how thrilled he was to see the Lionheart heir paying for a demonic contract. If it had worked, he would have gained power, and even that prostitute Noir might have taken interest in making a deal with him. Then Eugene accused the mage of acting out of self-interest and told him to shut up, threatening to kill him. Eugene then approached Iode, who was lying there drooling, completely unconscious. Without patience, Eugene slapped him hard across the face to wake him up, calling him useless. When Iode woke up, still confused, he asked how Eugene had gotten there. Eugene explained that he had followed him and wanted to understand the situation better, since it seemed Iode had strayed from the right path because of everything he had been through. Even so, he said that using dark magic was unacceptable, especially for the heir of the Lionheart family, someone who was supposed to become the next head. He pointed out that, besides trying to make a contract with a demon, Iode was also involved with succubi. When Iode said there was nothing he could do, Eugene headbutted him in anger, asking if he had gone insane. He explained that by making a contract with a demon, his soul would no longer be his. If the demon ordered him to kill himself, he would have to obey. Furthermore, he said that even before becoming a dark mage, the family name would already be stained, and he ordered Iode to stop that madness. If he really made the contract and the demon ordered him to kill his own parents and siblings, would he obey? Iode replied that he wouldn't, because they told him the demon's orders weren't absolute. Eugene asked if they really promised him that, if it was a succubus who said so. He said that Iode truly thought demons were like elves or dragons, but in the case of demons, promises were nothing but empty words. Even if some agreement was honored, it would only happen if their lives were in danger. Then Eugene asked how Iode had managed to do all of that, since he could barely take care of himself, having lost his essence to drink and illusions. Iode then asked what Eugene really knew about his life. Eugene replied that he knew there was a story, even if he hadn't heard it all yet, and told Iode to tell everything at once. Iode explained that Eugene would never understand, since he had been the center of attention for the past 4 years. He had become the face of the family, the child of the main household, and had received every kind of benefit from the family head. Eugene said that if anyone were listening to that conversation, they would call Iode prejudiced. He also received help, the method of the white flame, and had the opportunity to become a disciple of the Red Tower. But he explained that he didn't become strong because of the help. He received help because he was strong. Iode replied that he couldn't do anything without talent. Eugene made it clear that wasn't what he meant. He stated that he had worked hard to reach his potential, that he had been trained to the limit, while Iode had only wasted time getting drunk in Aroth. Eugene then asked if he truly believed he would gain power through dark magic and become the head of the family. But Iode replied that he didn't want that position. He wanted to become a dark mage, go to Helmuth, the land of freedom, and finally prove his worth. At that moment, Eugene punched him in the face, causing Iode to hit his head against the wall, break his nose, and start bleeding. Eugene asked what he had just said, in disbelief that a direct descendant of Vermouth wanted to seek admiration among the demons of Helmuth instead of from his own family. He said that Iode was completely mistaken, that the problem wasn't being the eldest son of the Lionhearts, but being a complete failure. He said that Iode had been born with something many would die to have, and yet he still said such nonsense. Eugene said he saw no point in continuing that conversation and that he would speak directly with Lobarian. Later, guards arrived to take the dark mage away, and Lobarian appeared before Iode, who was cornered and hesitant. He tried to justify himself by saying he hadn't become a dark mage, but Lobarian replied that he had tried, that he had dishonored his name, insulted Gilad, broken his trust, spat in the face of the Red Tower mages who had taught him, and even insulted his own master, who had done everything to take care of him. Iode insisted that he hadn't tried, but Lobarian interrupted him, saying that if he kept making excuses, he would have to punish him for his sins, even though he didn't want to. He told Iode to shut up and said that if he wanted to make excuses, he should make them to Gila and Theone, the people who had sent him there. Then Lobarian told Eugene that they should return. That same night, shortly after midnight, Gila and Théone arrived in Aroth at Lobarian's request, but they weren't the only ones. Another person had also arrived, the master of the Black Tower, Balzac. Eugene recognized him immediately. Balzac had been the tower master for several decades and was one of the 3 legendary dark mages who had formed a contract with the Demon King of Confinement. When Balzac sat in front of Théone, she reacted, asking if he dared to take that seat. Lobarian asked her to calm down, saying that the master of the Black Tower was not involved in the incident. Théone then questioned whether it wasn't Lobarian himself who had said someone tried to introduce Iode to dark magic. Balzac replied, stating that the Black Tower didn't manage all the dark mages of Aroth. The one responsible for the incident was a dark mage named Givid, who wasn't part of the tower, but rather a member of the Mage Guild. Before Théone could say anything else, Gilead intervened, making it clear that the master of the Black Tower was not involved in that situation. He wanted to know then why Balzac had shown up there. Balzac explained that he would take responsibility and that centuries ago, just learning dark magic would have been grounds for execution. After the Great Vermouth made a pact with the Demon King of Confinement, it became allowed for people to study any kind of magic. That's why at present studying dark magic or forming contracts with demons was no longer considered a crime. Even so, Balzac stated that he was there simply to respect the wishes of the Lionheart family. Gilead said that the situation was unpleasant and that Balzac seemed to be humiliating himself needlessly, as if trying to preserve the Lionheart's dignity. Balzac replied that he didn't want to become an enemy of the family because of the incident and had come personally to take full responsibility. He explained that the crime involving drug use would be judged according to Aroth's laws, and that all those involved in that den of vice would be imprisoned in the city's cells. Furthermore, sanctions would be imposed on the succubi involved. Théone then asked what exact responsibility Balzac intended to assume. He replied that he would cut off the head of Baron Hoyne Ulfer, an incubus who had made a contract with Gevid and tried to do the same with Iode. Shortly after, Balzac summoned dark magic. He said that the Demon King of Confinement had something to declare. Upon hearing that name, Eugene was already enraged. Balzac began a communication ritual and began relaying the Demon King's message, saying that he was deeply disappointed to see Vermouth's family, whom he loved so much, becoming the target of accusations and contempt. That was why he had decided to execute Hoyne Ulfer. Eugene was furious at hearing that damned demon claim to love Vermouth's family, and Gilead was equally outraged by the statement. After delivering the message, Balzac apologized once again for the incident. He told the Patriarch that it probably wouldn't ease his anger, but asked him not to forget that both the master of the Black Magic Tower and the Demon King were trying to calm the situation with the Lionhearts. Before leaving, he said he hoped they could meet again under more friendly circumstances, and cast a direct glance at Eugene, accompanied by a slight smirk. Eugene felt an almost uncontrollable urge to kill him right there. As soon as Balzac left the room, Gilead asked Eugene to step out for a moment. He rose from the table and exited. With only the 3 adults remaining, Gilead stated that they had failed Lobarian and that it was due to his own negligence. Lobarian replied that it wasn't because he had been too harsh with Iode. Gilead then said he would take Iode back to the main house, but Théone immediately objected. She said there was no reason to bring him back, since Iode hadn't completely fallen into the darkness of dark magic. She acknowledged that he had made mistakes, but she was sure he would not repeat them. Gilead replied that in the 300 years of the Lionheart family's history, the main bloodline had never produced a single dark mage. He said he wouldn't change that tradition, even if Iode were his own son. What he had done was already enough to stain the family's name, and he couldn't allow him to remain in Aroth. Théone, on the other hand, argued that there was no place for Iode in the main house. During his time in Aroth, the brothers Cyan and Yahello had been acknowledged as legitimate members of the main family. Therefore, it made no sense to send Iode back now. She said he had to stay in Aroth, and no matter what happened, she would not allow him to return to the main house. She accused Gilead of never doing anything for his own son, of only loving Anicilla, the mother of the other child, and the adopted son. Gilead asked if that was really what she thought, and replied that he had given everything to that child without making distinctions. He said he had sent Iode to study magic there in Aroth, but Théone said that if he truly cared about Iode, he would have done everything to make him Lobarian's disciple. If he had feared that Iode might go astray, he should have sent someone to guide him. Gilead told her to stop, saying she was only bringing more disgrace to the family. But Théone retorted that it wasn't absurd at all. If Iode returned now to the main house, she herself would be humiliated to death. She said that if the family had insisted on bringing the boy back, then he should take him to his parents' house. She would not allow him to live under the same roof as her. She preferred that he study magic at his father's home. Gilead then replied that if that was truly what she wanted, then she could do as she pleased, but Iode himself would have to accept accept it. Meanwhile, in the corridors, Eugene was approached by Balzac, who asked for a moment to speak. He said he didn't believe they would have a pleasant conversation, but Eugene immediately responded that he didn't want any kind of pleasant conversation with him. Balzac asked if Eugene didn't like him, and Eugene replied that he hated all dark mages equally. Balzac commented that even after 300 years, the resentment against dark mages remained strong, and said he understood it, but found it unjustifiable. He explained that, although it might sound strange, he had never done anything wrong. He knew Eugene might hate dark magic, but he hoped he wouldn't be hated personally. He extended his hand, but Eugene ignored it. Balzac continued, saying that he had heard about Eugene, about his performance during the succession ceremony, and his recent high magical aptitude, as well as the recommendation to Acreon given by the master of the Red Tower. Since he hadn't been able to mention it during the tense atmosphere earlier, he explained that Eugene was part of the responsibilities he had chosen to take on. When Eugene asked what he meant by that, Balzac explained that the recommendation from the master of the Red Tower alone wasn't enough to get him into Acreon, as other tower masters could reject him by claiming he was unworthy. Because of that, as the master of the Black Tower, he could also write a letter of recommendation. Eugene asked why he would do that. Balzac said he was interested in his talent, but acknowledged that his relationship with Loberian was not good. It was not that he had anything against Loberian, but Loberian deeply hated him, just for being a black mage. Helping Eugene might soften that hatred, and would also create a good relationship with the Lionheart family. Eugene said he would accept the letter, though he doubted it would bring them any closer. For Balzac, it was already enough that their relationship did not worsen. Balzac said that was all he wanted to say, apologized for taking his time, and said goodbye. But Eugene still asked if Balzac truly had no involvement with his brother's case. Balzac replied proudly that even though he was a black mage, he was a weak one, a stain on the name of black magic, and would never have been capable of something like that. Even as the eldest son of the Lionheart, he would never have given someone like him a chance. He said that answer should be enough, and Eugene once again thought that Iode was an idiot. Later, Eugene was holding the heart of a unicorn that had been stored in that room. It was Gilad who gave it to him as a reward for not straying off path. Eugene thought there were many ways to use a unicorn's heart, but extracting mana directly from it was the best. Its quality was excellent, with very few impurities. He started extracting mana into his 3 stars, and thought that, at this rate, he would reach the 4th star before the age of 20. That would completely shock the Lionheart family. In 300 years, no one in the family had reached 4 stars before the age of 20. Currently, Gilad was a 6-star mage, which was already enough to be considered one of the strongest on the continent. But if Eugene wanted to go beyond that, he would need to combine Hamill's methods with Vermouth's white flame starting from the 5th star. The next day, Gargus said that the giant testicles had cost 300 million, and of course, Eugene was furious. Gargus warned that they needed to hurry because if they did not send the money by noon, the next buyer would have the right to purchase. Eugene complained that, at this rate, he would just leave it to the next buyer. Later, at the communal bank in the Pentagon, the clerk was surprised to see that Eugene had a black card. The banker asked if he wanted to open a personal account, but Eugene replied that he was not interested. Gargus took him to the place where he was staying and said the testicles would be delivered as soon as the payment was made. It was a rare chance to see them. Eugene asked if he was seriously suggesting they go look at a giant's balls, thinking it was a joke. But then he thought it might not be such a bad idea. When Gargus asked if he was interested, he said that if Eugene wanted, he could give him some of what they extracted from the material. Eugene replied no, that he had absolutely no interest in that. He was not even a little interested in the giant's balls. What really interested him was the red flame method that Gargus had learned. He needed to understand the difference between the white flame method and the red flame method. That was when, while observing the crowd, Eugene saw something. Without hesitation, he jumped and ran in the direction of a specific person. He pushed through the crowd in a hurry. Eugene thought there was no way he was wrong. That soft light purple color was unmistakable, the result of an extreme amount of mana circulating through the body. When he saw her up close, it was a woman with light purple hair, and she was exactly like Sienna. As he approached, Eugene was unsure of what to say. He thought she looked exactly the same as 300 years ago, but he had completely changed. He did not even know if she would recognize him. It made no sense to say that he was Hamill, reincarnated as a descendant of Vermouth. That would probably just irritate her. Still, he approached and called out to her. When he tried to touch her, he realized it was just an image, a magical illusion, probably created by Sienna herself. The moment she turned around, Eugene was speechless. She smiled at him and whispered something in his ear before disappearing. He wondered if she had said that she had found him. He was deeply moved and answered to himself that he had also found her. Sienna Meldane, finally. He thought she was alive and had come to look look for him. Maybe she had recognized his soul, like the Storm King, or maybe she noticed because of the necklace he was wearing. Now Sienna knew about his reincarnation, but the fact that she had sent only an illusion indicated that she was not in a position to see him in person. Eugene believed that she was sealed, maybe by her own choice, or maybe sealed by someone else, perhaps even by the Demon King of Confinement. He thought that either way she could not move freely, but he promised himself he would find her. Gargi showed up and asked why he had suddenly run off. Eugene replied that it was nothing, and suggested they go to the inn. Later, Gargis asked if Eugene wanted to see the red flame method. He already knew the white flame method, so he did not understand why he would be interested. Eugene said it was just out of curiosity. Gargis replied that it was not a difficult request, then tore his clothes as he activated the method. Eugene asked if he could not do that without tearing anything, and Gargis said he could, but it was a matter of habit. He then focused his breathing, which began to look fiery. That was the red flame method. Eugene asked if that method also worked with multiple cores. Gargis explained that originally it did not work like that, but their predecessors had developed ways to increase the number of stars. He said the collateral families that managed to reach 5 stars with the red flame method could be counted on one hand. Gargis proudly said that he himself currently had 2 stars. Eugene thought that Gargis's family was the most successful among the collateral branches, and that they had 5 stars in total. After so much time, the red flame method was still limited to that. Meanwhile, the white flame method was taught only to the main family. That created a gap that could never be closed between the 2 bloodlines. To him, Gilad did not understand that. Vermouth was not someone who would impose such a rigid separation. Eugene had once considered combining the 2 methods, red flame and white flame, but now he thought it was pointless. He told Gargis he was leaving. Gargis asked if he really did not want to stay and see the testicles, but Eugene said he could enjoy that alone. Later, Eugene was in his personal laboratory inside the Red Tower. He thought about how they said that Akron possessed the last magic book written by Sienna, called The Witch's Craft. Eugene was certain there would be an important clue in it. Since both Liberian and Balzac had agreed to write letters of recommendation for him, he was already guaranteed access to the place. Eugene thought that Sienna had waited for 300 years. He hoped she would not be angry if she had to wait just a little longer. He was standing in front of a fragment of the Moonlight Sword. That sword dispersed mana the moment it came into contact with it, but that small fragment still allowed for tests, since it only nullified low-level mana. It was time for the test. If he could manage not to disperse his mana on that fragment, the strength of his mana would surpass the normal level of the white flame method. Meanwhile, Hera asked if something was wrong in the research room. Another mage replied that yes, for several days he had been hearing explosions and vibrations coming from there. Hera said she would go check it out because she needed to deliver something important to the Tower Master. She knocked on the laboratory door, asking for Eugene, until she heard another loud vibration and asked if he was all right as she opened the door. Eugene was inside, all sweaty, training, and Hera asked what he was doing. Eugene answered that he was training his mana together with magic training. Hera asked if he was really practicing magic since she did not see any magic circles around, and also wondered what that fragment on the ground was, still intact. Eugene then demonstrated what he was doing by throwing a fireball combined with wind spirit magic, hitting the fragment with force, although it ended up knocking over almost everything in the room. Hera noticed how fast he was, as if using his own core as a substitute for a magic circle. She also noted that his mana capacity was extremely powerful, far above what was normal for a first circle fireball or magic missile. She asked if he was training war magic, but Eugene replied no, that he was focusing only on mana training and felt that he was making progress. He thought that at first his magic would disperse before even exploding, but now he could force the mana to disperse closer to the target. Hera said that was wonderful and explained that she had heard explosions coming from the research room and was worried that someone might be hurt. Eugene asked if she came out of concern, but Hera explained it was not just that. The Tower Master also wanted to see him. When Eugene asked if he was on the top floor, Hera said no, he was in the Royal Library. It was then explained about the capital of Aroth, the Pentagon, which has 5 magic towers at its center, and there lies the Abram Castle, built in the middle of a large lake. It is not possible to access it without a boat, not even with the Pentagon's floating carriages or any other type of magic, because of the sealing circle that surrounds the lake. This circle was a gift from Sienna to the royal family as a symbol of friendship, and it remains active to this day, even after hundreds of years. Eugene thought all of that was incredible, because he only began to understand real magic after arriving in Aroth, and now he realized how hard and nearly impossible it was to surround an entire lake with a sealing circle. Hera asked if he wanted to visit the castle too, and Eugene replied that he was just admiring it because it was beautiful. But but not the kind of place he wanted to visit just for sightseeing. Hera agreed, saying that only magic tower masters and high-ranking nobles could enter Abram, and even the masters were not allowed to use magic inside. Only the royal family and the castle mages who swore absolute loyalty were permitted to do so. Eugene commented that it meant the tower masters had not sworn loyalty, and Hera explained that they had, but they did not obey irrational orders. The magic towers had a cooperation agreement with the parliament, not with the castle, which had its own group of mages. The towers were linked to the parliament, but that did not mean they were enemies of the castle or anything like that. Later, when they were in front of Abram, Hera explained to Eugene that 3 people had not agreed with his recommendation for Acreon. These 3 were the master of the Blue Magic Tower, the master of the Green Magic Tower, and the master of the Mage Guild. If Eugene could gain their approval, he could earn entry to Acreon. After delivering the message, Hera said she would return to the Red Tower and asked him not to be nervous, wishing him good luck. Eugene replied that he would definitely need it. Then he introduced himself at Abram as Eugene Lionheart. The panel that would evaluate Eugene was then introduced. Present were Tremple Wizardor, captain of the Abram Castle Mages, Lobarian Serpis, master of the Red Magic Tower, Generique Osman, master of the Green Magic Tower, Hiradouth, master of the Blue Magic Tower, Melkeith El Haya, master of the White Magic Tower, Balzac Ludberth, master of the Black Magic Tower, Edgard Gyron, master of the Mage Guild, and lastly, Honaim Abram, the first successor of Aroth. Honaim commented that he had heard about Eugene for years and was eager to finally meet him. Eugene thought that he too had heard of Honaim, a genius who reached the 5th magic circle before becoming an adult. Hiradoth said he had heard many things about Eugene and remarked that the masters of the Red and Black Towers had defended him tirelessly. Although he acknowledged Eugene's talent, he believed that swordsmanship and magic were very different things, and thought that someone like Eugene, only 17 years old and having just recently started studying magic, should never have received a recommendation for Acreon. He suspected there must be something behind such a recommendation. According to him, the master of the Red Tower was an old friend of the head of the Lionheart family, and the master of the Black Tower wanted to cover up his own shame due to a previous incident. Eugene responded that he understood the situation and asked what he needed to do to gain entry to Acreon. Lobarian explained that he would need to demonstrate his magic, since the nobles and wise mages present would analyze him. Hiradouth added that originally he should also present theses and research, but assumed Eugene had not done that. So Eugene began the demonstration by channeling mana into his 3 stars and transforming them into the 3rd magic circle, using the white flame method combined with his own mana. Tremple was intrigued to notice that Eugene did not separate the core from the magic circle, but rather combine them. Edgar thought he had probably been training his mana for the past 4 years, clearly showing talent for controlling it. However, to Generique, that was still not enough, because there was a big difference between merely controlling mana and truly understanding magic. Eugene then cast his first spell, a gale combined with fire magic, and right after that, transmuted everything into a blade made of mana. Tremple was impressed by the smoothness of the transition between spells, performed without any incantation, revealing advanced mastery of casting. Generique asked if he was capable of using magic together with an aura sword and suggested that Eugene demonstrate it. Eugene immediately accepted, drawing Winneth, while Melkith, who had remained quiet until then, simply observed attentively. Eugene managed to use the mana blade alongside the aura sword, and Hiradouth noticed that Eugene's mana circle remained intact, even after all that demonstration, still fully functional and using his core as the magic circle. Lobarian then asked the others what they thought about it, and Generique said they needed to talk. Lobarian asked Eugene to wait for a moment while they deliberated, and so he left the Great Hall. Hiradouth commented to Lobarian that he was certain he had not taught Eugene anything, and Lobarian confirmed, explaining that the boy only had access to introductory books from the Red Tower and studied on his own, without any tutor. Hiradouth questioned whether introductory books could really lead someone to achieve that level of magic. Honaim then stated that Eugene was a Lionheart, descendant of the Great Vermouth, a bloodline known throughout the continent for its excellence, and asked the sages what they thought about that, saying that he himself could already recognize Eugene's genius from afar. Melkith said that the magic the young Lionheart presented was of first circle level, but clearly exceeded the limits of that level, both in power and in mana purity and spell structure. His mana fusion was impressive, impressive, and she mentioned that she needed to check further, but believed that not even a fourth circle dispel would be able to cancel that boy's magic. Edgard acknowledged that he was a genius, but said he was still very young, and that there was no need to get overly excited about someone so early. Considering Acreon's prestige, he suggested that Liberian teach him for now, so that he could later be granted access. Tremple commented that investing in Eugene would be a good investment. Even at just 17, he already showed himself to be a gifted boy, a Lionheart, and it was clear that his potential was limitless. Despite the current good relationship with the Lionheart family, he suggested that, setting that aside, they could help him as a direct favor to the boy himself, investing in his future. Generique replied that even though Eugene was talented, he was an adopted son and would never become the head of the family. Balzac explained that one of the twins, Cyan Lionheart, would be the future head. Technically, Iode should have been the successor, but due to recent incidents and his inferiority, he would never win the competition for the position of patriarch. Balzac continued, saying that even if Eugene did not become the patriarch, the support role he represented for the family should not be underestimated. Tremple agreed with this, saying that Eugene would eventually have to leave the main family. If he got married and had children, he would follow the Lionheart tradition, which required them to move to the main residence. When he was invited to Aroth, he would already be a very skilled person and would not forget what they had done for him. Over time, he would become a great ally. Balzac also commented that Eugene had become well known for demonstrating his abilities at the ceremony 4 years ago, and even the Lionheart family itself had recognized his potential. If he were now to receive help from Aroth as well, they might even consider that he was a reincarnation of the great master Vermouth Hulf. Generique felt that Balzac was praising that boy too much. His words to him felt unique. Balzac asked what he meant by that, and Generique responded that the Demon King of Confinement, with whom Balzac himself had a pact, was known to influence his contractors. Balzac countered by saying that the Demon King was busy with matters in Helmuth and had no time to interfere in something like this. Furthermore, if he were speaking on his behalf, he would be acting very differently, with more determination and direct use of his power. This created a tense atmosphere in the sage's chamber. Balzac then apologized for sounding aggressive, saying he was only showing his devotion to the wishes of the Demon King. Melkith asked them not to stray from the subject and said that since it didn't seem like they would reach an agreement anytime soon, the best course of action would be to vote before young Eugene got bored. Honaim thought it was a good idea and began the vote, saying he agreed to grant Eugene Lionheart access to Acreon. The Royal Library of Acreon did not only store valuable magical tomes, but also the legacy of great mages spread across each floor. On the walls, the history of Aroth was written. Despite being called a library, the place felt more like a museum. Eugene thought the building had 15 floors, with Sienna's legacy being kept between the 12th and 14th. Melkith personally came to meet him. Eugene thought she was the best elementalist in the region, the only one in history to form contracts with 2 elemental kings. Even without her elementals, she was already a formidable mage. Eugene then asked if the discussion was over. Melkith replied yes, that it would have taken too long for everyone to agree, so they decided to vote. 5 people voted in favor of Eugene's entry, 2 voted against, and 1 remained neutral. Eugene asked if, with the majority in favor, he could access the higher floors. Melkith confirmed, but asked if he wasn't curious to know what the others had said. Eugene replied no, since the majority had agreed. Melkith said she would tell him anyway. She had remained neutral in the decision about Eugene. She was not against his entry into Acreon, but knew that if she had taken a side, the discussion would have lasted much longer. Just by looking at the faces of those present, it was clear that many were irritated. They had decided by vote, but were still arguing among themselves. Hiradoth, the master of the Blue Tower, even though very angry, agreed to Eugene's entry. Melkith found that incredible, because he had shown the opposite since entering the room. He had changed his mind. Then she asked Eugene who he thought had voted against him. Eugene replied that he wasn't curious to know, but Melkith told him anyway that the ones who voted against were the master of the Green Tower and the master of the Mages Guild. Eugene emphasized that he really wasn't curious. Melkith asked if he was really 17 years old and commented that he seemed like a boring old man. She said she couldn't even irritate him a little, and that he showed no discomfort at being underestimated or at seeing a Lionheart being looked down upon. Eugene replied that he didn't feel anything like that and said he would see her later. But Melkith asked if the sword he was carrying was really Winneth, the Stormblade imbued with the favor of the elemental King of Wind. Eugene confirmed, and she replied that she had wanted to form a contract with the Wind King for a long time. She said he never answered her calls, even after several attempts. She had even asked the Lightning and Earth elemental kings, but they said the Wind King did not make contracts with anyone. She had sent a letter to the Lionhearts, but the response was that nothing could be done, as their treasures could not be lent to outsiders. Melkith was upset about that. She thought they probably believed she wanted to steal it, but all she wanted was to use the sword as a catalyst. Of course, no one believed her. Eugene explained that he couldn't lend Gwyneth because technically he wasn't the owner. He was only using it with the family head's permission. Still, Melkith insisted, saying that no one needed to know. She just needed 5 minutes. It wouldn't take long, maybe just a day, and he could watch if he wanted. Eugene thought that the storm hadn't responded to him again since that incident, and it had already been 4 years. He probably didn't have enough mana to summon it at the moment. But with Melkith, Master of the White Tower, and the only elementalist in history to make contracts with 2 elemental kings, there was a chance. If she used Gwyneth as a catalyst, the Wind Elemental King would probably respond. Still, Eugene felt it wasn't the right moment to accept. If he waited a bit longer, he might gain more favor from her. He then asked where he could get the access card to Acreon, and realized he had been right about her. Melkith had already started offering herself. She said she could take him there. That was how he got his access card to Acreon, since his identification mark was enough. Melkith asked if he didn't know that. She explained that the familiars of Acreon were left behind by the great mages whose works were displayed there. Among them were the Mage King who founded Acreon, the Battle Mage who was the progenitor of all combat magic, and even a familiar of the sage Sienna. She commented that he didn't seem very interested in that, but reminded him that earlier he had been searching through Sienna's floors, had visited her mansion on the first day, and later met with the Collateral family friends in Mellon Square. Eugene replied that she was very well informed about everything he did. Melkith said he was famous. What could she do? And also a bit rude, which she didn't expect from him. Finally, she asked when he would lend Gwyneth. Eugene said he wasn't going to lend the sword. Later in the elevator, Melkith asked if he saw that slot there, explaining that was where the card had to be inserted so the elevator would open. She asked if he wanted to go to the 12th floor because she knew that little rascal was a fan of Sienna. Eugene said no. He asked if Melkith wasn't coming with him, but she replied that she wanted to, just didn't have that much time. She commented that seeing a fragment of the truth for the first time was always shocking, and joked that he should bring diapers, since he might end up wetting himself. She wished him good luck, but Eugene got annoyed and shut the elevator door in her face. On the 12th floor, he was greeted by the grand gallery of the sage Sienna. Eugene asked if that was Sienna herself, but she replied no. It was a familiar spirit that managed Sienna's hall. Eugene wondered if this was the spirit Melkith had mentioned. He was surprised to be called Eugene Lionheart and asked how she knew his name. The familiar explained that he had just registered. Eugene had forgotten about that. The familiar said that not only her, but all spirits were synchronized with Acreon's magic system and knew everyone who entered and exited. Eugene asked what her name was, and the familiar replied that Miss Sienna used to call her Myr. Eugene asked if it was because Sienna's last name was Murdane, and Myr confirmed, saying it was a beautiful and amazing name. Eugene thought that Sienna had created a familiar spirit that looked exactly like her, and even gave her own surname as the name. He couldn't understand what she had been thinking. He commented that he wasn't sure how it was possible, since he knew familiars didn't usually resemble humans so much. Myr replied that only she was like that, because she was special. Her creator was Sienna herself, and she had been made based on Sienna's personality. Eugene remembered what Lobarian had said, and commented that he thought creating living beings with magic was forbidden. Myr explained that she wasn't alive, that she didn't have a soul like humans. Her body was made of magic, and Sienna's consciousness was in that place. She pointed to a huge mass of magic. Eugene asked what that was, and Myr said it was a good question. She took such a deep breath that her hat fell off, and then explained that it was the essence of Sienna's magic, the result of a lifetime dedicated to witchcraft. Eugene thought about the magical books created by Sienna, divided into 3 levels: advanced, intermediate, and basic, all written before she went into seclusion. He wondered how that could even be considered a book. Myr explained that thinking books needed to have a book form was a big mistake. She said that obviously he wouldn't understand, since not even the masters of the magic towers could comprehend Sienna's witchcraft. Eugene thought that Myr's personality was really similar to Sienna's. That proud attitude, the sarcastic smile, and the look of someone who looked down on everyone, it was exactly how he remembered her. He commented that Sienna hadn't changed even after death. Myr disagreed, saying she had changed. Her personality was based on Sienna's youth, but over time she became someone much more elegant and refined. She didn't smile as much anymore because she focused only on researching and developing new magic. Eugene wondered if that was really true, if that was the same Sienna Sienna he had known. He asked what Mer meant when she said Sienna's consciousness was within that witchcraft. Mer replied that her consciousness was sustained by the very magic of the witchcraft, and that her purpose was to protect it. She had been guarding that hall for 200 years, following Sienna's orders. Eugene approached the witchcraft and remembered what Loberian had said, that after reading that spell, the magic he had used his whole life felt like child's play. Now he understood that it truly was something from another world. He asked Mer if she knew the reason Sienna had gone into seclusion. Mer replied, of course not. She said it was something sudden and unknown. Neither her students nor her subordinates, not even she herself, knew what had happened. To this day, the king of Aroth, the masters of the magic towers, the head of the mage guild, and countless others continued to question Mer about Sienna's whereabouts, but she always replied that she knew nothing. Even so, no one ever believed her. Many had already entered the witchcraft to search her memories. It seemed that everyone had lost the ability to learn from their own mistakes, because every few decades they returned to check everything again. But Eugene thought that looking into Mer's memories wasn't just to discover Sienna's whereabouts. Even if Aroth's mages treated her as perfect experimental material, any regular mage would get excited upon seeing that. He commented that he heard the only publicly available volume of witchcraft in Acreon was the high volume, but all 3 volumes were present there. Mer explained that it wasn't quite like that. That was the original witchcraft, and Sienna had extracted the intermediate and low volumes from it. Later, she donated the original under the guise of it being the high volume to Acreon. Mer commented that Eugene seemed very interested in Sienna, and he replied that anyone would be, but she countered by saying he wasn't even a real mage, he was a Lionheart, and it was the first time she had seen a descendant of Vermouth. From what she knew after returning to Aroth, Sienna never met with the Lionheart family again, not even with Vermouth himself. Eugene reflected that, according to Lionheart family records, Vermouth had never met with any of his old companions again, even after returning to Helmuth and founding the family name. The only ones present at their reunion were Sienna, Anise, and Molon, and that only happened at Vermouth's funeral. Even if he was a reserved man, it was still strange that he had never seen any of them again after everything. Eugene asked if Sienna ever talked about her companions, and Mer confirmed. She said Sienna always called Molon an idiot and said Anise wasn't a saint, but a snake. When Eugene asked what she said about Hamill, Mer replied that she called him a ridiculous piece of crap, dumb, stupid, and motherless. Eugene then asked if she wasn't supposed to be more refined, and Mir said that refined people also knew how to curse. Even so, every time she talked about her companions, Sienna seemed on the verge of tears, especially when she mentioned Hamill. According to Mer, she always suffered when remembering him. When Eugene wanted to know what Sienna said about Vermouth, Mer replied that she never said anything. She never praised him, never insulted him, never even mentioned him. Later, the two stood before Sienna's portrait, and Eugene noticed it was the same one that hung in her mansion. Mer commented that the smile in that portrait was fake, as Sienna never smiled like that. When they were calibrating her personality, they asked Sienna directly why she allowed a portrait with that smile when she was always so sad. She answered that if something were to be passed on to future generations, it was better to show a beautiful smile than a sad expression. Mir said that she couldn't leave Acreon, so she had never seen the portrait with her own eyes, but had heard that Sienna's mansion had the same painting. The smile had been added by the painter, and perhaps that's why Sienna never liked it much. Still, as Sienna herself said, it was better to appear smiling to the world than crying. Eugene almost patted Mer on the head, but she slapped his hand and complained, telling him not to cross the line. Even if she was smaller than him, she was 200 years old and didn't want to be treated like a child. Mer said there were other things in Sienna's hall besides the witchcraft. The magical instruments she used were also there. The staff she used throughout her life was present, and Mer commented that she imagined Eugene would recognize the name. It was made from the roots of fairy trees, which only grew in the great forest of Shamar, the land of all elves. The staff was called Akasha, the most powerful in the world. It was made from the roots of ancient trees that grew at the center of the forest. Trees the elves believed had the souls of their ancestors merged into the world tree, sustaining the world itself. Mer explained that the elves, despite their pride, had cut a root from the world tree because of Sienna, which was a shocking event. Eugene thought that she was not even a half-elf, yet she had always had a special connection with them. She didn't know who her biological parents were, as she had been abandoned as a baby in the jungles of the great southern forest. Luckily, an elf passing nearby heard her cries and rescued her, taking taking her into the land of Shamar, deep within the forest. At first, the elves did not accept her presence, but upon seeing her magical talent, they began to respect her and taught her elven magic. Mer said that no one had ever received a staff made from the root of the world tree, but that wasn't all. The red crystal at the top of the staff was also special. Eugene completed the sentence, saying that it was a dragon heart. Mer confirmed. Among all the staves in the world, only 2 contained a dragon heart. One was Akasha, and the other, Eugene said, was Blood Mary. The current owner of Blood Mary was Count Edmund Cordreth, one of the 3 black mages who had made a pact with the Demon King of Confinement. However, 300 years ago, the one who held Blood Mary was the lich known as Belial, a direct servant of the same Demon King. He was the one who killed Hamill. The Castle of Confinement was unlike any other, both in structure and in threat level. All the monsters and demons living there were far more dangerous than anything the group had faced before. Among those enemies, 3 stood out and were known as the Sword, the Shield, and the Staff of the Prison. When they fought the Shield, Hamill was gravely wounded, injuries that should have been fatal. And after the battle against the Staff, he ended up with a massive hole in his chest. Eugene asked if he could touch the staff. Mer replied that he could, as he wouldn't be able to use any magic with it anyway. Akasha only recognized Sienna as its true wielder. Many mages had tried to control Akasha after her disappearance, but it had never accepted anyone else. Eugene asked if that was really true, and when he laid his hands on the staff, he felt a massive amount of mana flowing. He understood that Akasha would not accept any kind of mana he tried to insert. Even so, as he felt its power, Eugene saw a mirage of Sienna and felt a spark of hope that maybe he could use Akasha. He thought it would have been better if she had left Akasha behind instead of the necklace. Mir remarked that Eugene must really like Sienna. He tried to deny it, but she said he was a liar, since it was obvious from the way his eyes sparkled whenever he talked about her. The way he looked at her belongings also showed how he felt. Eugene replied that he just liked old stories, nothing more. Mir then said that if that were true, he would love a certain book she had. She went to one of the shelves and took out a copy titled The Great Adventures of Vermouthhalf. She explained that it was a well-known tale, since neither Sienna nor the other members of the group had ever told anyone what really happened in Helmuth. This children's story was the first book in the world to narrate the feats of the great Vermouthhalf, but Eugene immediately reacted badly to the book. He said that although he respected, admired, and even wanted to be like Hamill, that story was garbage. In it, Hamill was portrayed as utterly pathetic. Mir explained that this was the first version, very different from the revised editions currently available. It was said to have been written 300 years ago, but no one knew who the author was. Eugene read a passage to see if it was really different, but realized it wasn't. In the book, it said Hamill had challenged Vermouthhalf the moment he saw him, but couldn't even touch him, and ended up crying after falling flat on his face. Eugene was outraged, thinking that he really had fallen, but he did manage to graze him, and there was blood, even if just a little. He wondered if it had been Anise who wrote that trash. Mir then said that if he really liked Hamill, he needed to see something else. They walked down a hallway and reached a room filled with magical holograms showing images of Vermouth's group. Everything had been created based on Sienna's memories. They weren't actual portraits, but rather her recollections of each of her companions. The man in the center, handsome and confident, was the great Vermouth. The woman with eyes shining beneath her smile was the loyal Anise. The giant beside them was the brave Milan, and the one covered in scars with a stubborn expression was the foolish Hamill. Mayer commented that Hamill had never left behind a single painting of himself, and that Sienna's hall was the only place in the world with something resembling his likeness. Eugene remarked that he was quite handsome, clarifying that he wasn't talking about his ancestor, but about Hamill himself. Murr asked if he was crazy. Eugene admitted that Vermouth was attractive, but Hamill had something unique, something exotic. He even felt a bit embarrassed, and said he was just being honest about his feelings. Later, while reading some books, Eugene asked if Sienna's hall extended from the 12th to the 14th floor. He also wanted to know what was on the top floor. Murr replied that the 13th floor held Sienna's research and records from when she was developing Acre. She said that with Eugene's current understanding, he wouldn't be able to grasp any of it. The 14th floor housed the tomes of her most advanced research. It was all very difficult to read, but there were some notes left behind to assist anyone who tried to study it. Eugene asked why the witchcraft wasn't on the lower floor. Murr replied that it was, and that it would be easier to show him than explain. So they walked together to the room that held the original witchcraft. Murr explained that the witchcraft detailed the most efficient method of moving mana through the circles, and how to amplify its power through that system. It demonstrated how to simplify inefficient spells and cast them without incantation. It also explained how to perform multiple advanced spells by dividing parts of the brain to execute each one, as well as storing spells in the subconscious so they could be activated instantly. The most important aspect was the correct use of circles. Most mages use circles nowadays, but the witchcraft method was far more advanced. It allowed for the use of the least amount of mana possible while still achieving maximum efficiency. Eugene really didn't understand anything. Mer said of course he didn't, because that wasn't something easy to comprehend. Witchcraft was known as the greatest magical tome in existence. Eugene asked how he was supposed to read it, and Mer told him to close his eyes, extend his hand, and inject his mana into the witchcraft. That way, he would be able to read it. Eugene wondered if simply injecting mana would actually work. Moments later, he found himself in a completely empty space. It felt like a dream, but at the same time it was different. Unlike a lucid dream, he couldn't move freely there, and there was nothing in front of him. The feeling was similar to being attacked by a demon, a sense of immense helplessness. It was then that he found himself before an ocean made entirely of mana, and was swept away by its whirlpool. He ended up in front of a massive magic circle, filled with countless other circles inside. Then he woke up. Back in reality, he asked if he had embarrassed himself. Mir said that passing out like that was a bit embarrassing, but also shared that many mages had wet themselves after coming into contact with the witchcraft. At least he had only been unconscious for 2 hours. Mir mentioned that the Master of the White Tower, Melkith, and the Master of the Blue Tower, Hiradoth, also wet themselves when they experienced it. Eugene thought that wretched woman was clearly speaking from personal experience. Mir asked what he had seen inside the witchcraft. Eugene answered that it was hard to explain. He wasn't exactly sure what he had seen. He had only a vague understanding of it and couldn't yet interpret it fully or turn it into useful knowledge. What had caught his attention was the structure of the magic circle, which looked like an infinite number of circles dividing within a single larger one. He commented that he thought there were only 9 circles. Mir confirmed that yes, originally Sienna had established the method with only 9 circles. But she didn't stop there. She continued her studies and surpassed all previously conceived limits. She reached what was called the Eternal Gap, the absolute peak of circle magic, something only she had ever attained. Since the witchcraft was created, many mages had tried to recreate the Eternal Gap, but of course none had ever gone beyond 9 circles. She explained that to create a perfect circle, it was necessary to use all mana without letting a single drop escape, keeping everything controlled within a larger circle, while also dividing that circle into many smaller ones. That was the ideal functioning of a magic circle. Mir said the Eternal Gap was extremely difficult to create, but made the use of magic much easier. A simple fireball spell cast using the Eternal Gap would be more powerful than casting a hellfire spell with 9 normal circles. Moreover, it didn't require complex incantation formulas or large amounts of mana. She asked if he understood. She said Sienna became the strongest person in the world by creating the Eternal Gap and probably could have killed the Demon King by herself. Eugene thought that maybe she hadn't remained idle after returning to Helmuth and had probably become much stronger than when he was still alive. Anis, Mullen, and Vermouth must also have grown stronger, so why didn't they face the 9 Demon Kings again? Eugene thought that, in the end, everything had been Vermouth's fault. Later, Liberian asked what it had been like for him to read the magical texts of Acreon in person. Eugene replied that he wasn't really sure, but with his current knowledge, it would take years just to understand a single book. Melkith said that was natural, since those texts represented the essence of centuries of Aroth's magic. Even though Eugene was a very talented genius, there was a limit to how much he could learn without a proper teacher. That's why she suggested that if he borrowed Gwyneth for a while, it would help him understand about 10 of those texts. Eugene replied that it didn't even need to be magical texts specifically, and asked if she had any other interesting items to offer. Something useful would be great. Melkith said he was good at negotiating. She said a staff would be a good choice, since he didn't have one. A staff would help control mana more easily and simplify many techniques. Loberian commented that he also had excellent staves and could lend one to Eugene whenever he wanted. Melkith then asked him not to ruin her deal. Loberian replied that she already had contracts with 2 Spirit Kings, so why was she being so greedy? Melkith complained that the old geezer thought that if she made a contract with the Spirit King of Wind, it would cause trouble. Loberian responded that of course it would. Melkith asked if, after decades of friendship, he still didn't know her. She said she didn't want to get involved with Aroth's politics or any annoying stuff like that. Loberian replied that power changes people. Melkith understood what he meant, but assured him that she wasn't doing it for power. It was just because of the contract with the Wind Spirit King. Loberian accepted that, saying he trusted her since she had made a mana oath of her own free will. Even so, Melkith replied by calling him a damned snake. Eugene said he had thought about it, but he didn't want a staff. Melkith said she wasn't giving it, just lending it. Still, Eugene said he preferred to send R in his place. He would let her use Gwyneth for a few days, but if the deal was to trade one artifact for another, he'd rather not bother. Melkith got irritated, said he was unbearable, and offered 1 year of Gwyneth in exchange for a single day with her item. Eugene teased her, saying then 7 years for a week, since that was how long she wanted to make the contract with the Wind Spirit King. Melkith confirmed confirmed that yes, absolutely. She explained that, even though he was a Lionheart and didn't know it, for her and the other spirit callers, Tempest, the Wind Spirit King, was like a dream. That was because Vermutholf himself had once made a contract with him. Lobarian said that if Eugene didn't want a staff, the Master of the White Magic Tower had a very good and valuable artifact. Melkith tried to stop him from continuing, but Eugene was already curious. Lobarian said it was something called the Cloak of Darkness, while Melkith was telling him to shut up. Lobarian asked why she was so angry, since he knew she hadn't used that thing in over 10 years. Melkith asked if he knew what she had gone through to get that cloak. Lobarian suggested that maybe it was better to lend it to someone who really needed it, instead of letting it sit unused like a decoration. Eugene asked what that Cloak of Darkness was. Melkith replied that it was just a winter coat, warm and comfortable, nothing more. Lobarian explained that it was a cloak enchanted with extremely high-level space-time magic, with a function similar to Geden's shield, which was stored in the Lionheart family treasure vault. That shield redirected attacks into itself and released them in another direction. Melkith said it wasn't exactly like that, since you couldn't redirect attacks without precisely calculating spatial coordinates and guiding them with mana. Lobarian argued that the cloak's exterior was enchanted with high-level defensive magic, so just by wearing it, you were protected by fifth circle spells. Melkith explained that this depended on how much mana the user had. Lobarian went on, saying the cloak also had subspace magic, allowing the user to store as many weapons as needed. Since Eugene used many different weapons, it would be useful for him. Melkith called him a damn snake. Eugene said he liked it and decided he wanted the Cloak of Darkness instead of the staff, but now he had to ask the Patriarch for permission. Melkith warned that she hadn't agreed to that. Eugene replied that it was a shame. He said he had used his brain so much up there that now he was starving and asked if Lobarian knew any place to eat. Lobarian replied that, of course he did, said the place had amazing food and an even better view. Eugene then realized he had never taken time to admire Aroth's night view. Meanwhile, Lobarian was already calling a magic carriage. Melkith, seeing this, said fine, and Eugene, with the most sarcastic tone in the world, asked if she was still there. Melkith said that if he wanted the Cloak of Darkness that badly, she would lend it. Eugene said there was no need to rush, that he first had to ask the Patriarch for authorization, and that made Melkith completely lose it. Now she seemed totally unhinged, which made the other two a bit uneasy. Later it was explained that the Patriarch didn't oppose lending Wyneth to Eugene. He only required that a Lionheart supervisor be present when the Master of the White Tower came to take the artifact. When they were gathered, Eugene asked if that was really the Cloak of Darkness. Melkith confirmed, said it was pretty, and Eugene agreed, saying it would look even better on him and that she didn't need to be so angry. They ended up making a deal, and Melkith asked who the supervisor would be. She guessed it wouldn't be the Patriarch himself. Eugene explained that it would be his younger brother, Cyan, the guardian of the Lionhearts. It was the first time a family treasure would be lent out, so it made sense for him to be there, especially since he was already involved with the Iode situation. Melkith asked if the family's guardians were really there. The so-called Lionheart hunting dogs, also known as the Black Lion Knights, were the enforcers of the family's rules. They had many titles, but as Melkith herself used to say, their role wasn't much different from that of a guard dog. They followed the Lionheart laws even more strictly than anyone else. 1 year earlier, Cyan had joined that order. It wasn't exactly a grand achievement. If someone was skilled enough and proved their loyalty to the family, they could become part of it. Anyone from the main bloodline could become a Black Lion Knight. That was the order of knights that served all branches of the Lionheart family, unlike the White Lion Knights, who served only the main household. Behind these orders was the Council of Elders, composed of those who, regardless of their branch, had engraved their names in the family's history. Not even the Patriarch was on their level. Eugene thought that in all 4 years, he had stayed at the main family estate. He had never seen any of them. These knights were made up of the most loyal and powerful members of the Lionheart bloodline, and the council acted behind them. They had to be incredibly strong. Shortly after, a magical floating carriage arrived, and Melkith commented that it was a rather pretentious entrance. Eugene said he thought she respected the Great Vermouth, but Melkith asked him not to misunderstand. She respected Vermouth, yes, but didn't like the Lionheart family that much. She hated how the image of the main family crushed the collateral lines and couldn't stand the cunning old men from the Council of Elders either. Even so, Lobarian warned that it wasn't the time to express that kind of dissatisfaction. If she really wanted to borrow borrow Gwyneth, she needed to avoid anything that might displease them. Melkith replied that she wasn't going to suck up to anyone. She said she was offering a fair deal, including the beloved Cloak of Darkness. Eugene commented that it didn't matter, just asked her not to drool on the cloak since he would be using it soon. From the carriage stepped a girl with a ponytail and white hair, whom Eugene immediately recognized as Cyan. He asked what she was doing there. Cyan explained that her mother's birthday was coming up and she came to buy a gift, as well as check if he was doing well. Eugene asked if she was serious, if she was really that concerned. Right behind her appeared Cyan, smiling as he saw Eugene, but then came an old man who said it hadn't been that long since he last saw him. They got straight to the point. Eugene thought he had no idea who that old man was, but just from his posture and muscles, it was clear he was very strong. Eugene knew that man used a spear, not a sword. Behind him was a mage, which made sense since the meeting involved Gwyneth and the Iode situation. Further back was a commanding woman with a deadly gaze. When Eugene looked at her hands, he noticed she carried neither sword nor spear, so he figured she might fight with her bare hands. From her clothing, it seemed she held a high position within the clan. She approached and asked Eugene if he was already 20 years old. She commented that she had heard Labyrinth was now the master of the Red Magic Tower. Labyrinth replied that the last conversation they had was right before he took that position. The woman said it had been so long she didn't even remember, and to be honest, she couldn't care less. She then introduced herself to Eugene as Carmen Lionheart, his great aunt, but made it very clear that he should never call her that. Eugene thought that if she was his great aunt, then she was Gion's aunt. Considering the appearances of Labyrinth and Melkith, it wasn't surprising that someone like Carmen looked so young. Still, it was hard to believe someone like her came all that way just because of that deal. Labyrinth mentioned that it was cold outside and suggested they continue the conversation indoors. Later at the table were gathered Carmen Lionheart, younger sister of the former patriarch, who never married and always remained in the main family estate. She was currently the captain of the 3rd Division of the Black Lion Knights. With her were Nishon Lionheart, vice captain of the same division from a collateral bloodline, and Falgo Lionheart, the mage of the 3rd Division, also from a collateral line, but a rare one with a magical tradition. He was the one leading the deal with Melkith. Falgo explained that the storm sword, Gwyneth, was a treasure of the main Lionheart family, while the Cloak of Darkness was an artifact of the master of the White Magic Tower. The proposed deal was that for each day Melkith kept Gwyneth, Eugene would get to use the Cloak of Darkness for a year. Melkith confirmed that was exactly the deal. Falgo prepared the contract and materialized it magically in front of Melkith, who then asked what would happen if Gwyneth was destroyed and whether there would be any kind of penalty. Carmen answered bluntly, saying that in that case, Melkith would pay with her life. The sword was a treasure of immeasurable value, and if anyone wanted to borrow it, they had to risk their own existence. Melkith replied that her life also had a value that couldn't be expressed in money. Carmen retorted that maybe that was true in Aroth, but not for the Lionhearts. Falgo tried to ease the situation, saying there was no need to go that far. He said he respected Melkith greatly as a mage and didn't believe she would make such an amateur mistake as to destroy Gwyneth. He added that for now it was just a contract, and everyone simply needed to hope such a tragedy would never happen. But if it did, the matter would be discussed at the appropriate time. Melkith then asked if they were saying that the clan would decide what to do later. Carmen replied that if she didn't like it, she didn't have to borrow the sword. She said no one was being forced into it and that if it hadn't been for the Patriarch's order, she wouldn't have come. Melkith commented that some might think Carmen was there just because of her, but she said the real reason was definitely something else. Carmen confirmed she was there for something truly important, not for a trivial matter like that. She said she would meet with Balzac soon, as in an hour she had to discuss matters related to Iodar, the dark mage imprisoned in Aroth. Labyrinth reminded Carmen that the last time they spoke about that, they had agreed to follow Aroth's laws regarding the mage's judgment. However, that didn't fully align with what Gilad wanted. Carmen explained that even if the Patriarch had said to follow Aroth's laws, the Council of Elders had decided otherwise. According to her, that incident stained the Lionheart name, and that cursed dark mage needed to pay for it. Meanwhile, Eugene watched and wondered if what Carmen was holding was really a pocket watch. He had never seen anyone carry something so heavy and inconvenient. Melkith asked why she carried 2 watches and had a cigar in her mouth if she wasn't even going to smoke. Carmen closed the pocket watch and replied that she had already received permission from both the King of Aroth and the Council of Elders. She said it would be much better if they handled the interrogation themselves, instead of making things complicated for both sides. Melkith realized her question had been completely ignored. Eugene thought that permission had probably cost a good fortune, enough to make Aroth unable to refuse the request and allow the Lionhearts to interrogate and punish the criminal on their own. Carmen asked what Melkith was going to do about Gwyneth, since there wasn't much time. Melkith thought it would still take about 3 hours to use the sword and finalize the contract with the Wind Spirit King. After that, she could return the cloak in about 2 months, so she accepted the deal. Eugene left with his new cloak, and Melkith was delighted with the sword. Carmen commented that the design was pretty nice and said she liked the fur around the collar, as it reminded her of a lion's mane like the one on his arm. But she also said the color was a flaw. It would be much better if it were white, like the flames of the white flame method, or at least gray. Carmen said the color he was wearing would look great on someone like her, a black lion knight. Eugene stared at her, and Cyan said they should give a cloak to Carmen if she wanted to try it on. Eugene replied that he hadn't heard her ask for it, but Kyle said they didn't need to hear it. Right away, Nishon was already pulling the cloak off Carmen's back. Eugene said fine, she could try it. Carmen put it on, even struck a pose, and said it wasn't bad at all. She said it would be even better with a lion emblem on the chest and a lionheart crest on the back. Melkith reminded her that it was just a loan and asked her not to mess around with the cloak. Carmen completely ignored her and said it was time. Jian asked if Cyan was going to stay, and she said yes, she would stay with Eugene. Later, already in the capital, Eugene sent a message to Cyan asking her to get rid of that adult magazine he had hidden under his bed, the one with the girls wearing bunny ears. Eugene said that Nina already knew about it, and he was afraid that when he returned, the maids' uniforms would also have bunny ears. Cyan said it was disgusting and that she would tell her mother. Eugene joked that Cyan could give him some tips, like saying bunny ears were out of fashion. Cyan then asked what kind of ears he liked. Eugene, confused, asked what kind of question that was. Cyan replied that since he said he didn't like bunny ears, she wanted to know which kind he preferred. Eugene said he liked normal ears, like a normal person. He then asked why he had to go along to buy a gift for Anicilia, since he didn't even know what she liked, and didn't like her either. He said he would just end up following Cyan around. Cyan complained that he was being a pain, and that he would leave her walking alone through Aroth's capital, a place she had never been to before. Eugene said it wasn't like she was a little kid. Cyan replied that he said that, but he was still going with her. Eugene said he had no choice, because he knew Cyan would be mad if he didn't. Cyan asked about his birthday, which had been a few months ago, and if he had had a party. Eugene said no. He just spent the day reading in the Red Tower Library. Cyan asked if he got any presents, and he said no. None at all. Lobarian and Hera wanted to offer him some gifts, but he begged them not to. I asked who that woman was, and Eugene explained that it wasn't a woman, but a horse. He asked if she had come just for the gift and also what she wanted with Carmen. Gael said she was quick, but only for useless things. She was trying to convince Carmen to be her mentor since her brother would be the next patriarch, and she didn't want to become matriarch herself. Her mother seemed to be trying to arrange a marriage, but Cyan wasn't interested in that either, and didn't want to keep living at the main estate forever. Eugene asked if she wanted to join the Order of the Black Lion Knights, but Cyan replied that she couldn't do that yet. She only wanted to learn from Carmen. Eugene said that was great. It was good that she wanted to do something for herself instead of continuing to depend on her family. He asked how Cyan was doing, and Cyan said he talked a lot about himself. Eugene told her to check how many stars he had reached in the method, and said it was still 3, just like when he left. He asked if Cyan had heard anything about Iode, and she replied that she only knew he had returned home. Cyan said that apparently Tion was looking for a wizard to teach Iode, since he still wanted him to learn magic. Even so, Cyan thought it was unnecessary, since Iode wouldn't become the patriarch and should live however he wanted. She then changed the subject, saying they should leave that boring talk behind and go eat. She asked if he was hungry and if he knew any good restaurants. Eugene said he knew many, but there was nothing better than home-cooked food. CL replied that the taste didn't matter, because eating out was about the experience. It was the atmosphere that mattered. Later, Nishon was killing one of the dark mages involved in the Iode case through torture. Carmen commented that the bastard didn't reveal anything. Even after all that, it seemed like he didn't know a thing. It was strange that such a weak dark mage had gotten in contact with a Lionheart from the main bloodline. Either he didn't know the truth or he was insane. Someone said he was probably just desperate. Gevitt had been involved with dark magic for decades, but never achieved anything. If he died without success, his soul would be claimed by demons, and he wouldn't be able to reincarnate. That's why he wanted to do whatever he could, even if it put him in danger. Carmen said she heard that the queen of the night demons, Noir, wasn't involved, and asked what Balzac thought of the situation. Balzac said he didn't know why they were blaming him, since he did his best and even apologized. Carmen replied that it made more sense to assume he was responsible than that other useless dark mage. Balzac understood why she thought that way, but asked what he would gain from it, since if he had been in charge, he wouldn't have left any clues and would have made sure everything was untraceable. He told Carmen that he had many enemies, and the Demon King of Confinement cared for and trusted him. In Helmuth, many people disliked how many favors he received from that king. In his view, someone had set something up to drag him into the incident, and even though there was no proof against him, there was also no proof of his guilt. He explained that not only him but Carmen as well could end up in a difficult position. Carmen replied that he could say whatever he wanted, but freedom came with responsibility. She asked if he was sure he could handle the consequences of what he was saying. Balzac said that, as a servant of the Demon King of Confinement, he also cared for the Lionhearts just like his king, so apologizing and cooperating was the best he could do. After all, he was just a human and couldn't control his frustrations. He understood the lack of respect many had for him, even though he was back, master of the Black Tower and servant of one of the Demon Kings. But he said he wouldn't endure those insults forever, not for himself, nor for his master. Guion had already drawn his blade. Carmen said she didn't want to cause trouble in foreign territory, and Balzac replied that if she wanted, they could settle it in a way that no one would be sad. Carmen asked if he was sure he would still be alive by then. She said it was something to think about, since someone might be trying to stain the Lionheart name, even if nothing had been proven. She said she hadn't been able to extract anything from that dark mage, not with physical torture or mental magic, and doubted that he would get anything either. Balzac replied that his own words had turned against him, but, as he had said before, Balzac insisted that it wasn't him, and that he had no personal motive to do any of that. Carmen replied that for now she would believe him, then asked what had happened to the incubus that tried to make a contract with Iode. Balzac said she probably wouldn't want to see, but Carmen said she had already seen horrible things in her life, including Balzac himself. Since she insisted, he used dark magic to pull from the other world what had happened to the incubus, but he only managed to bring back the guy's head. Balzac commented that the Demon King of Confinement had taken his soul and that he could deliver it to the Lionhearts if they wanted. When Balzac dropped the head on the ground, Carmen kicked it like a soccer ball, smashing it against the wall. After that, she told the other Black Lion Knights that it was time to return. She also warned that if Balzac dared to contact Eugene Lionheart again, there would be consequences. Balzac replied that the only authority capable of controlling his actions and will was the Demon King of Confinement, and that Carmen had no right to control him. As they were leaving, Carmen asked Guion if he truly believed that was what had happened. She said she suspected Amelia Merwin and was ready to strike the master of the Black Tower. She explained that the Demon King of Confinement did not restrict the desires of the dark mages he made contracts with, and he didn't care about stopping fights among his subordinates. Guion replied that even if she was behind everything, that did not mean Balzac was the one who instigated it. Carmen said it could have been Nahama, who had been acting suspiciously in recent times, and she predicted a war would break out in a few years. She was sure that Nahama would attack Duras first, since there had always been a rivalry between them. If Nahama invaded Duras, then Kiel would prepare for war, and that would inevitably involve the Lionhearts. Guion asked if she meant Amelia had done something in advance to slander the Lionhearts before the war even started. Carmen said it was also possible that Gevid had acted on his own. Then she asked Guion if he knew what would have happened if she hadn't ignored Balzac's provocation. Guion replied that if she had fought him, everyone there would have died except her. Carmen said he was being modest, but Guion insisted that he didn't have enough confidence to fight a dark mage. And Carmen agreed, saying she didn't either, which was why she avoided the fight. She explained that Iode would be placed under surveillance, and that a Black Lion Knight had been sent to Theonis' family. They wouldn't assassinate the main family line, but there would be no second chances. Iode would live under constant watch and would lose his rights as heir. Carmen mentioned she heard that Tiona was looking for a magic teacher for him, but questioned if they would really allow that to happen. If someone was behind all of this, they would likely try to contact Iode again. Guion then thought he never imagined that child, so devoted to magic, would end up turning to dark magic. When it was time to leave, Eugene walked Sile to the carriage and said it had been a nice outing, wishing her a good trip. Carmen asked if Eugene had ever considered joining the Black Lions, saying that the position of second captain squire was open, and if he wanted, she could recommend him. Eugene thanked her for the offer, but declined for now. Carmen said it was a real shame. Then they departed with the magic carriage. Meanwhile, Eugene asked Lobarian if there was any news about Melkith. Lobarian replied no, because if she had succeeded, she would definitely have bragged about it already. Since no one had heard anything yet, the contract attempt was probably not going well. And indeed, at that moment, Melkith was not satisfied with her results. She had even taken off her clothes to be a little lighter. At the top of the White Magic Tower, Melkith was thinking about that damned storm. She had sent her message to the spirit world, but he wasn't even responding. She didn't even bother to warm up her body to increase sensitivity. She was completely naked to make the connection easier. Once again, she tried to summon the Wind Spirit King, master of hurricanes, calling for him to form a contract. But instead, Levin, the Thunder Spirit King, appeared, and Melkith asked why he was there, since she hadn't called him. Levin said that Tempest had sent him to tell Melkith to shut up, because he didn't want to make a contract with her. Melkith knew he was listening. After all, she was the greatest spiritualist in the world. She insisted, saying she was the only one capable of forming a contract with him and demanded that he appear before her. Levin then asked his contractor to at least show some dignity, but when Melkith screamed even louder, demanding that Tempest appear, Levin had to intervene, striking her on the head with lightning. After that, he explained that his contractor couldn't offer Tempest what he truly wanted. Tempest's desire was to move north, to a region of the demon realm that had never been conquered by anyone. It was an old desire, one he couldn't forget for centuries. After that, Melkith was completely devastated. A few days later, Eugene wondered how someone could end up in that state, looking like a mummy in just 10 days. He asked what had happened with the contract, and Melkith angrily asked why he was even asking if he already knew the answer. Eugene questioned why she was so mad, and Mare got so irritated that she slammed the book shut, walked up to Melkith, and told the young lady who had peed herself that this was a place of silence. But Melkith kept screaming uncontrollably. Eugene asked if Tempest had really refused the contract, wanting to know if it was true or just a lie sent by him. Melkith asked why she would lie. Eugene said that if she waited until the end of that day, it would complete 10 years, but if she returned Wynneth now, it would be only 9. Melkith asked if it had really been 9 years, then returned Wynneth, asking him to take care of the Cloak of Darkness. Eugene stayed a bit longer at the tower, reading books from Acreon. In one of them, he read about the chief of the giants, Kamash, an incredibly massive being, hundreds of years old, considered the strongest in the history of the giants. Thousands of humans fought against 100 giants, but the number of soldiers didn't matter much because Vermouth was there. Some knights who still thought themselves superior to others approached Vermouth, saying they belonged to the Order of the Rose Knights, or something like that, and that they wanted to fight alongside him. But even all together, they couldn't match Vermouth. Besides that, Vermouth didn't like to fight in large groups. There was only one person he was willing to fight beside, someone he truly protected, and that person was Hamill. Vermouth asked if he could tear off the enemy's left arm, and Hamill replied that he'd rather tear off the right one, since that bastard was right-handed. Vermouth agreed and told him to go for the right arm. The only weapon capable of stopping Kamash's breath, which was protected by the Demon Kings, was the sacred sword that acknowledged only Vermouth as its master. That's why only he could kill Kamash. When he finally cut off his head, blood splattered, and even after the death of the giant chief, the other giants kept fighting. But the protection granted by the Demon King, which interfered with human magic, had weakened, allowing Sienna to finally show her true power. Eugene then asked if it was Sienna who had written that book full of swear words. Mur reacted indignantly, telling him not to speak such insanity. Eugene commented that there were so many compliments directed at Sienna in the text that it seemed like she had written them herself. Mur considered that an insult, saying that no sane person would write those kinds of compliments about themselves, and that even if he was Eugene, she wouldn't forgive such an offense. After that, Eugene got up and returned to the spellcraft. Mur thought it was good, but said he might be getting too arrogant for his current level. Eugene replied that it was better than running errands everywhere, but Mur reminded him that he always failed at those tasks. It was explained that during the 10 days after the departure of the Black Lion Knights, Eugene spent almost all his time inside Acreon. He reflected that, for now, recreating the Eternal Gap was impossible. To do that, he would need to be at least a 9th circle mage or higher. The Eternal Gap, simply put, was a large circle with smaller ones inside it which could grow infinitely. It was possible to create a circle, destroy it, and generate another, thereby increasing mana capacity. But Eugene didn't use circles to cast magic. He spun the stars of the White Flame method to form a ring that functioned like a circle. If he could add another star within that ring, maybe it would be possible to advance even further. What Hamill had learned in his past life was merely a cheap mana training method used by low-ranking soldiers. He added that experience to his own knowledge, and later on, it helped him fix a training method. That's how Hamill developed his own way of manipulating mana, creating an internal core and making it explode repeatedly, spreading the accelerated mana throughout his body. With that method, Hamill was able to tear off both the leg and arm of Kamash. Vermouth acknowledged his combat talent, and Sienna asked if he had really spent money to buy that cheap method, since she couldn't understand how someone could train with such a poor technique and still reach that level of strength. Currently, Eugene no longer faints when looking at the eternal void, where infinite circles recreate themselves, surrounded by a great circle that connects them. Now he can see this process in motion. It was not just Hamill who could perceive it. Eugene Lionheart could see it too. He knew he could recreate the eternal void using the White Flame method. A few years later, he turned 19. It was Eugene Lionheart's 19th birthday, and at that moment he was writing in Acreon. Mur asked if he was not hungry, since it was nearly lunchtime. Eugene replied replied that he was a little hungry, but said that if he left now, he would lose focus. Mer commented that there was no reason to rush, and that writing a thesis required calm to avoid mistakes. Eugene responded that he was not rushing, that he was just making sure not to make any mistakes, and had been reviewing the content carefully, letting nothing go unnoticed. Mir remarked that mages usually take decades to complete a thesis on magic, and Eugene replied that he had not taken decades to learn magic himself. Mir said that was exactly why he was being arrogant, trying to write a thesis of that level of difficulty. She said he should stop and focus on learning magic for another 10 years. Eugene commented that Mir was all shy because of him. Mir snapped back, telling him not to cross the line and not to call her that, reminding him that she had lived 200 years more than him. Eugene teased her, saying that Granny Mir was feeling shy, and Mir thought that would be the day she killed that bastard. Eugene asked if she wanted him to leave, since he had been living there for the last 2 years, basically being the only one who regularly visited Acreon. Mir replied that it was obvious, since the other mages had stayed away after witnessing the witchcraft years ago. Those who saw it were shocked and amazed, and all of them tried to analyze and understand the phenomenon but failed, so they ended up focusing on completing their own magic. But Eugene was different. He kept going to Acreon every day, trying to understand the witchcraft on his own. Mir asked if he would leave Aroth once he finished his thesis, and Eugene responded by asking what else he would do there. Mir said he could do whatever he wanted, and that even though she did not know the opinion of the Master of the Red Tower, she was sure he would accept Eugene as his successor. Eugene said he did not want to be the master of any tower. Mir then suggested he join the palace mage troops, since the captain wanted to recruit him. Eugene confirmed that Tremple had always been friendly with him, but said he did not like him very much. Mir said that even the prince liked Eugene, and that if he worked for the prince, he could brag about it for decades. Eugene replied that even though he liked the prince, he would not work for him. Then Mir asked why he would return to the Lionheart family, since he would never become the patriarch. Eugene asked if there was any reason not to go back home. Mir commented that, in her view, everything he had achieved in recent years was impressive. In just half a year since he started writing the thesis, he had managed to simplify complex magical theories and improve his own magic in the process. Eugene explained that he was writing the thesis for his own satisfaction, since he was the only one capable of using the magic contained in it. He said he was just organizing his own thoughts, and did not intend to reveal it to the academic association. He thought that no mage could use the method of the flame ring. He remembered a conversation he had with Liberian, where it was said that, even without considering magical understanding, it was physically impossible to use that method. That was because Eugene did not use the traditional circle method, and even though he replaced the stars with the white flame method as if they were circles, that did not mean the main family's white flame method could replicate it. He tried to explain this in the thesis, but could not even begin the process. After all, he had never created a core and had also never learned the conventional white flame method, so he tried to replace his own circle, but the mana ended up going into reverse flow. Eugene now possessed 4 stars from the white flame method and successfully incorporated the eternal void into his circle, creating a ring that used those 4 stars to constantly ignite the mana within it, just like Hamill used to do in his past life. The rotating flaming ring prevented the mana from escaping the circle. This was the method of the flame ring, and Eugene intended to try creating it once he acquired the 5th star, but when he approached the witchcraft, he ended up changing his mind. He spent a lot of time on the 6th floor, the Hall of Space, and on the 8th floor, the Hall of Intense Heat. The latter held the magic of the most powerful fire mages in the world. Eugene needed to master space magic to properly use his Cloak of Darkness. Loberian accepted him as a pupil, helped revise his thesis, and also corrected the basic spells of the magic circle so they would work together with the flame ring method. Eugene divided his time between Acreon, where he spent half his waking hours, and his studies with Loberian, which made those 2 years in Aroth extremely intense for him. Eugene asked if Mir was upset that he was leaving even though she did not want him to. Mir replied that she was not angry and had no right to stop anyone from leaving. She said he could go if he wanted, since she never had the desire to leave that place. Even if she wanted to, she could not, so she let him go, even if she felt alone in that boring and lonely place. She said she was not sad to say goodbye after 2 years together, because she was not even human and knew very well that humans always do whatever they want. Eugene asked if she was sure about that, and Mir said yes, reminding him that she had lived 200 years longer than him and was used to farewells, but she asked him to at least say something before leaving, unlike Sienna, who simply left without saying anything. Eugene said okay and stood up. Mir then complained that she had just opened her heart and he was standing there all calm. She called him a bastard and said the rest did not matter, that he was just a piece of crap, a child with no respect for elders. She asked if it was so hard to listen to an elder once in life, but then added that if he stayed in Aroth just because of her, she would feel very guilty. Mir's personality was based on Sienna's younger version, so her emotions and behavior were sometimes childish and stubborn. She was aware of that and felt foolish for admitting those things, knowing that the real Sienna probably would not have acted that way. She thought she was insulting the wise woman by behaving like that, but Eugene said no, he thought Sienna would have done exactly the same. Mir disagreed, saying that was impossible, that Sienna would never act that way, and Eugene had never even met her, so how could he be so sure? Eugene insisted he was sure. Mir asked if he was saying that because of a character in a book he read, since that was all written based on someone's imagination. Eugene said he would soon finish his thesis, and that if he was not too greedy with it, he would probably finish before the end of summer. Mir asked what difference that made, and Eugene said he would come back to see her before leaving, especially because he would have a lot to tell. Mir then teased him, asking if he was mocking her, saying he did not care and that he could just leave. Eugene said he would explain everything at the right time. Later he met with Tremple, but he did not like him much. Eugene asked what he wanted this time, thinking Tremple was always too direct and obvious in his intentions. Tremple was there to talk about the position available in the Mage Corps, as he had mentioned before, and wanted to know if Eugene had changed his mind, but Eugene said no, he did not want it. Tremple asked how his thesis was going, and said he could help, even though he knew Lobarian, Eugene's mentor, was already reviewing the content. Even so, as the master of the Red Magic Tower, and a specialist in summoning magic, Tremple believed he could contribute. He was skilled in both summoning and combat magic, which was why he was the captain, but Eugene said he did not even know the content of the thesis. Tremple thought, of course not, only Lobarian knew, and was keeping it a secret from everyone. Tremple said he could take a look at Eugene's thesis, claiming he was as used to teaching as the other tower masters. Eugene thanked him but declined the help. He explained that if he accepted the offer, he would be disrespecting Lobarian. Tremple said that if Eugene saw it that way, it was fine. They could leave the matter aside. Even so, Eugene left shortly after, thinking that guy was far too uncomfortable. He thought it would be even worse if Tremple discovered he had recreated the Eternal Void. He was sure Tremple would show up even under his blankets if he learned about the flame ring method. After all, that method was not so different from the white flame method. Even during the casting part, a great mage like Tremple would not notice the difference just by looking. Being able to hide skills from a high-rank mage was already an achievement. Later, Eugene spoke with Lobarian, who said that if they considered the spells Eugene could use and his current power, he had already surpassed the 5th circle. But Eugene insisted that his limit was the 4th circle. As spells more advanced, then that could not remain stable within the Eternal Void. He wondered if he was still lacking in knowledge, but Lobarian said he did not think that was the problem. Simply put, Eugene had already reached the limit of current knowledge. Eugene had not yet perfectly recreated the Eternal Void using the flame ring method. He was replacing the circle with a core, using 4 white flame stars in place of 4 cores. It would be more accurate to say that the number of cores equaled the number of circles, to put it simply. And whenever he advanced in the white flame method, the flame ring method became even stronger. Even so, Lobarian warned him. For now, the flame ring method showed no drawbacks, but risks could accumulate as it evolved, since it was a completely unknown magic method. When Eugene asked whether he could not use advanced magic, Lobarian explained that, unlike the traditional circle-based method, the flame ring method allowed him to use high-level spells with relative ease. 5th circle magic was possible, but attempting 6th circle spells was extremely risky. They had no idea what kind of damage such an attempt could cause, since his body was not prepared for such complex spells. Eugene said he was aware of that. Lobarian then asked whether he still planned to return immediately to the Lionheart family after finishing his thesis, or if there was something else he wanted to do in Aroth. Eugene replied that he wanted to try the famous ice crab from the Luhar kingdom, something he had dreamed about since childhood. The conversation then explained more about the northern region of Lahama, the nation founded by Malin. Lobarian asked whether he intended to go all the way to Lahama, pointing out that there were many ice crab restaurants in Aroth too. Eugene answered that it would be better to eat the delicacy at its place of origin. After After eating the crab, he planned to go to Nahama because he heard that cactus scorpions were very tasty as well. In truth, he was just making excuses, since the real reason was something else. 200 years ago, Anis, revered as the saint of the Juris Divine Empire, left on a pilgrimage without giving any explanation to the emperor. The last place she was seen was in the middle of the Nahama Desert. Lobarian commented that he did not know Eugene enjoyed traveling, tasting local cuisine. He said that if Eugene liked crustaceans that much, he should have lobster for lunch. Later, while eating lobster, Eugene ended up meeting the Prince of Aroth. The prince apologized for interrupting the meal between master and disciple, but got straight to the point. He told Eugene that if he decided to stay in Aroth, he would be given the position of captain of the palace mage troop. Eugene asked if that wasn't a bit too hasty. The prince replied that within 10 years, he would become the king of Aroth. Even Lobarian was shocked by that statement, saying it was dangerous to say such a thing, since the current king was still in good health. Rong the prince explained that he did not want to be misunderstood. He had already received a promise regarding the succession, and his rise to the throne was guaranteed. The people of Aroth already saw him as the future king. The palace mage troop was under the authority of the king, and although some formal processes were needed out of respect for the Senate, he would ensure the position as soon as possible. Eugene thanked him for being so valued, but admitted he still didn't know how much stronger he would become by then. Hunaim explained that the master of the Red Tower was very discreet, but he believed there must be a good reason for that. He said Eugene didn't need to explain if he didn't want to, but revealed that he had analyzed Eugene's mana and noticed that his body was completely filled. Considering mana alone, he was already at least at the 5th circle. Then he said that Eugene had understood the eternal void, and that wasn't by accident. Eugene asked if he really had to answer, and Hunaim said that if the prince asked, then yes. Eugene replied that he didn't intend to lie to the prince, but he also didn't want to be completely honest. It wasn't that he hated the position of captain of the palace mage troop, he just had no interest in it. Hunaim commented that with Eugene's abilities, he could hold a high-ranking position in any field, but power alone was not enough to sustain Lenarov. Hunaim then asked about teaching. He knew that Sienna had created the 3 parts of witchcraft. One was in Acreon, and the others were kept in the royal palace's treasury. This surprised both Eugene and Lobarian. Eugene remembered that Mare herself had said that Sienna had created 2 other parts. Lobarian asked since when the royal family had those parts, and Honim explained that it was not to be misunderstood. The royal family possessed them, but they did not use them. They were just copies that Sienna gave as a symbol of affection. Not even the royal family knew where the original volumes were. Eugene asked if Honim was suggesting that he could see the version stored in the royal palace. The prince explained that at the moment it was impossible. Although he had received a favor from His Majesty, witchcraft was considered the greatest magical text in history. Not even he could act freely in relation to it. But once he became king, he could use his authority to show the volumes, as long as it wasn't to Eugene's master. He then asked what Eugene thought of the proposal. Eugene himself considered that it wasn't a bad offer. He wondered if there was any real reason to hesitate, since for the past 2 years, he had dedicated himself deeply to the study of witchcraft. Just the first volume, preserved in Acreon, was already impressive. Imagining the others made him curious. There was also another motivation. The witchcraft could contain clues about the whereabouts of Cyan, maybe something the royal family had never discovered. Eugene said that if it wasn't possible now, he would return to Aroth as soon as the prince became king, and then they could resume the conversation. Honim agreed and said he would trust him for now. He stated that he would send a letter as soon as his coronation was confirmed. Meanwhile, Mur was quite confused. She thought Eugene had perfectly combined the cores with the eternal void, but still noticed some fundamental instabilities. She didn't believe it was physically possible to create a system more refined than that. Maybe it didn't reach the level of Sienna's original eternal void, but Eugene's flame ring method far surpassed the common circle system. She considered it impressive. For most people, it would be extremely unstable, but Eugene could use it very well. Mur commented that it was a bit selfish of him, since only he could use it, but if it was truly exclusive, then it was an extremely refined method. Now that the thesis had been completed, he would leave Aroth. They asked when he would depart, and Eugene said he would leave in 2 days. Mur commented that she thought he would be the kind of person to say he would leave the next day. Eugene replied that he was still human and needed at least 1 day of rest. The Red Tower was preparing a farewell party, which pleased Mare, since he could eat a lot and be praised by everyone. But Sienna noticed something in her attitude and remembered that a few months earlier she had said something important to her. Mare remembered and replied that she needed to check something before that. Other people might try to extract information from her about what they had discussed. Mare reacted and said he was doubting her. She assured that she would never go around spreading what Eugene had told her, especially not to that master from the Green Tower, who always showed up to bother her whenever Eugene wasn't around. Even if someone took the witchcraft away, they wouldn't be able to extract any information from it. She explained that the record of the conversations of all mages who studied in Sienna's hall was stored in the deepest parts of the witchcraft. She stated that it wasn't because Eugene was special, but because it was a function implemented to protect the mage's privacy. As long as the witchcraft remained intact, there was no chance of any information leaking. Eugene then said that if it was really that secure, what he was about to say would never leave that place. He then told Mur that he had reincarnated. Mur looked at him, confused, and asked what the hell he was talking about. Eugene said that he had reincarnated with all the memories of his past life intact. Mur thought it was a very bad joke and said she couldn't even laugh out of pity. Eugene then revealed that his name in his past life was Hamill, the stupid Hamill. Mur asked if he was serious, and Eugene wanted to know if she didn't believe him. She said it was hard to believe, but if it were true, it would explain a lot about him. After all, he had understood the eternal void in just 2 days of studying magic, replicated the concept with natural talent, and still modified everything to fit his own style. If in his past life he really was the stupid Hamill, friend of the great Vermouth, then he was definitely a peculiar figure. Sienna had grown up among the elves and learned magic from them. The brave Milan was the son of the great chief of the Bylard's northern battle tribe. The faithful Anise was a saint, carefully raised by the bishops of Eurus, and the great Vermouth, according to what was said, had been a slave taken to be sacrificed to demons. He stole a sword from one of them trying to survive, and even though it was the first time he had ever held a weapon, he killed dozens of demons and black mages, leading a rebellion that freed all the slaves. Mur commented that it sounded like an exaggeration, like every legend. Eugene said he didn't see it with his own eyes, but it was probably true because that Vermouth guy was a monster. Mur remarked that the stupid Hamill was also strange even within their own group. He never showed great potential from the start, nor did he have a remarkable background. He only picked up a sword after his village was destroyed by monsters. In an attempt to survive, he developed hatred toward monsters and demon kings and became a mercenary. Even though he had such a common origin, he became strong enough to rival the other members of Vermouth's group. Mayer said that if he really were the Hamill from the stories, that would explain the absurd speed at which he learned. Hamill was a person with no manners at all, but in terms of pure growth, he might have been the most remarkable in the group. Eugene replied that he didn't think it was anything that impressive. Throughout the journey, his only goal was to surpass Vermouth. He gave up on magic because he had no talent for it, then trained with sword, spear, and even his fists, all to try and defeat him at least once, but he never could. Mur asked if that was really true, since by many standards, Eugene himself was a monster. He answered that it didn't matter if others considered him a genius. Vermouth was the bastard he most wanted to defeat and never could. Mur understood why Eugene had called Hamill handsome, and Eugene replied that he was in his own way. Then Mur asked why he was telling her all of this. If he was expecting something, he was asking too much, because she didn't know where Sienna was. Eugene said that wasn't why he told her. He said he had known her for 2 years, and from the beginning, she reminded him a lot of Sienna, both in appearance and personality. Mur replied that she was literally created for that. Eugene placed a hand on her head and asked if he had gone too far. Mare said she would forgive him just this once, since he was a member of Sienna's group. Eugene asked if she thought Sienna had died. Mur said of course not. Eugene didn't think so either. He said Sienna wasn't the kind of person who would die quietly, without even leaving a will. That was why he had decided to look for her. He said Sienna, Milan, and Anise were still alive somewhere in the world, and he would find all of them. Mur asked if he really intended to search for Sienna, and Eugene wanted to know if she missed her too. Mur replied that yes, of course she did. Eugene said that was one more reason to find that damn woman, because Sienna had abandoned her own family for over 200 years. Mayer told him not to speak of her like that, and Eugene replied that he could. He reminded her that Sienna used to curse him all the time 300 years ago. Mayer then asked if he could really make that promise in front of the witchcraft, being Hamill's reincarnation. Eugene said yes, if she wanted, but added that it would be nice if she stopped calling people like they were far away when they were standing right in front of her. Later, standing in front of the witchcraft, he introduced himself as Eugene Lionheart, explaining that in his past life he was Hamill Genus, and he swore by his blood, and by the name of the Lionheart family that he hadn't lied about any of it. Mur was using the power of the witchcraft, and explained that when Sienna went into seclusion, many mages tried to dissect and uncover its secrets, but there was one thing they were never even able to glimpse: the information stored in the deepest part of the witchcraft. Their conversation would be stored there and never revealed to anyone. What she was about to say were words no one had ever heard. Sienna had shown some signs before isolating herself. 1 week before disappearing, she was with Mare and suddenly let out a gasp of shock and collapsed. When Mare asked what had happened, Sienna said that one of her familiars had just died at Hamill's tomb. Sienna became completely furious upon learning someone had invaded that tomb. Eugene asked if Hamill really had a tomb, and Mare said that was how she found out too. After that, Sienna isolated herself and hid that conversation in the deepest part of the witchcraft. She didn't speak to anyone else before disappearing, because she didn't want to make things worse by revealing too much. But since he was Hamill, he had the right to know. Eugene said he had never heard anything about that, and thought his body had been completely disintegrated by Belial's curse, the one that destroyed both body and soul. Mur explained that despite that, his soul had remained intact enough to reincarnate, so his body must have also remained intact. It was possible that his reincarnation was connected to everything that was happening. Later, while walking along the night roads of Aroth, Eugene thought that Sienna must have created a tomb for him and hidden it somewhere. He needed to find that tomb, and thought that people usually chose places with strong connections to the deceased. It definitely wasn't in the demon castle where he died. He wondered if it could be in his hometown, until he was suddenly interrupted by Balzac, who approached out of nowhere. Eugene said he had already noticed he was being followed for a few minutes, and had been trying to ignore it, but now it seemed Balzac wanted to interact. Balzac remarked that Eugene always seemed angry when he saw him, maybe because of a certain incident. Eugene asked if one of the spheres in his crystal pouch was what he thought it was, and Balzac replied that he knew quite a lot, including about Eugene's plans. Balzac said he had heard that Eugene would soon leave Aroth, pass through Luhar, and then head to Nahama. He admitted to being a bit concerned since Luhar, the northern territory, was very close to Helmuth, and the Lionheart family had little influence in that region. Luhar used to ban demons and black mages, but the local royalty had changed its stance in the past 5 years. Now there were many demons in Helmuth, and among them was a considerable group that went against the will of their master. Besides that, the Demon King of Imprisonment was not the only monarch in Helmuth. Eugene asked if that meant the King of Apocalypse was preparing for another war, but Balzac explained it wasn't exactly like that. The Apocalypse wasn't a tyrant. He respected the will of the Demon King of Imprisonment, and as long as that king remained inactive, the Apocalypse wouldn't act either. Even so, Eugene remembered what he had witnessed in his past life. When he saw the Apocalypse move just once, he still couldn't fully explain what he had seen. At that time, a distant blot had moved across the plains, and no one could speak a word. If Nisia's prayers hadn't calmed everyone, they would have been ruined right there. Balzac commented that just because the Demon King of Imprisonment remained still and the Apocalypse was silent, that didn't mean they shared the same intentions. Demons by nature were violent. Many among them opposed the peace that had been maintained for centuries. As silly as it might sound, Balzac insisted that demons were not a race fond of peace. Eugene then asked if he meant that demons could be pretending there were no threats. Balzac replied yes, and that there could be many demons with plans to attack. This didn't apply only to those who served the Demon King of Imprisonment. More precisely, the demons who served the Apocalypse were willing to do anything to break their master's silence. There were also many other demons who wanted to become new demon kings, since their number had dropped from 5 to just 2. There were many vacant seats, and Duchess Noir Zavella constantly expressed her desire to take one of those positions. Eugene commented that they couldn't just get together and form a basic democracy. Balzac replied that demons were the kind of species that would destroy the ballot boxes if the result wasn't what they wanted. Eugene thought about Noir Zavella, the succubus queen, and wondered if he could fight a high-ranking demon with his current skills. He couldn't guarantee he would win. He planned to go to Luhar at some point, but it wasn't time yet. He thanked Balzac for the warning and said he would go to Nahama first, then head to Luhar later. Balzac then told him to be careful in that desert. Eugene asked if it was because of the sandstorms, but Balzac replied no, it was because of Amelia Merwin. She was already a great black mage even before making a contract with the Demon King of Imprisonment, who was known for giving his subordinates more freedom. Amelia's freedom was so great that she did whatever she wanted. Balzac said that if Eugene happened to meet her along the way, he could give her a letter. He assured that if Eugene did that, no matter what he had done, Amelia wouldn't hurt him. Eugene asked if he could read the letter, and Balzac said yes. When he opened the envelope, Eugene was shocked to see it was empty. Balzac explained that the content wasn't what mattered. Just carrying a letter with his seal was enough. He put the seal back and said that although he couldn't prevent the unknown dangers of Nahama, he could handle Amelia's tantrums, since she really was preparing to head there. So it was a good idea to bring it. Eugene asked what Balzac wanted in return. Balzac replied that he understood it was inevitable to feel hatred toward black mages, but he hoped Eugene could feel at least some affection for him. Eugene found that a bit suspicious. Balzac was being being so nice that he didn't know whether to trust him. Still, he admitted that he didn't hate him or anything, he just thought it was strange. Balzac said he was almost out of breath from hearing that, asked not to be misunderstood, and assured that he only wanted to be friendly. He said everyone was trying to be friendly with that young master full of potential, and clarified that he wasn't into men or anything. Eugene accepted the gift, since Balzac had insisted so much, and said he was so thankful he even wanted to invite him to the farewell party happening the next day. But he explained that he didn't actually want him to come, it was just a way of expressing gratitude. He said the human heart was a peculiar thing, and that he would love to invite him, but if Balzac were at the party, his image might get worse. Balzac told him not to worry about that, and Eugene thanked him and left. Indeed, a grand farewell party was held for Eugene. During the celebration, Herodoth asked why he had been invited. Eugene replied that they were not strangers, but Herodoth noted that he was one of the only Tower Masters invited. Eugene asked if he really didn't know the reason for that, and Herodoth said he just didn't want Eugene to hate Tremple and Generic too much, since they had a talent for drawing attention. Eugene asked if that wasn't already enough to draw his attention. The Blue Mage said he wished Eugene would join them, but that he had his pride. He knew it would be wrong to try to steal him from the master of the Red Tower. He had expected something like that, but also noticed that Juck hadn't invited Balzac either. Eugene commented that Balzac's presence wouldn't sit well with Loberian, but admitted he didn't really know what kind of person Balzac was. He said he had heard that Balzac was once a disciple of the Blue Tower Master, and had studied under him. Herodoth confirmed that Balzac was indeed quite peculiar, and that he had never really understood his actions. He said that many decades ago, Balzac had been an extremely talented mage, practically guaranteed to be the next master of the Blue Tower, but suddenly he left the tower and went to Helmuth, claiming he wanted to expand his magical horizons. At the time, Herodoth was beneath him, but thanks to Balzac's departure, he was able to become the Blue Tower's master. 10 years later, Balzac returned from Helmuth as a black mage and joined the Black Tower. With unconditional support, he eventually became its master. Herodoth commented that Balzac could have been the greatest master in Blue Tower history, but apparently that wasn't enough for him. No matter how powerful magic or a human being might be, they would never surpass the magic of the Demon King. Herodoth had heard that Eugene would soon go to Nahama, and mentioned that the desert there was inhospitable, complex, and full of dangerous details. He said that if Eugene was really heading there, he recommended hiding the fact that he was a Lionheart as soon as he crossed the border. Eugene remembered that Loberian had said the exact same thing. Herodoth commented that the tide of the world was changing. The assassins of Nahama, who used to operate in the shadows, were now interfering even in trivial matters. He doubted they would dare threaten the Lionheart family or the Empire, but also doubted that drawing attention from Nahama would be a good thing for Eugene. Eugene replied that he would keep that advice in mind. Later, Eugene was already in the desert of Nahama. He thought the fur-lined cloak would attract too much attention in that heat, but fortunately, the Cloak of Darkness had the ability to change shape. Not only that, it connected to his senses and tried to balance the temperature, cooling down when the weather was too hot. Thanks to that, Eugene's body remained comfortable even under such extreme conditions. Loberian had given him a magical map that used coordinates to locate any place in the world. At the moment, Eugene was in the far west of Nahama. If he continued heading north, he would reach Eurus. Initially, he planned to go to the border of Eurus to search for his old tomb, where his hometown was located, but it seemed that would no longer be necessary. The desert of Nahama had been expanding over the past 300 years. The abnormal winds of that region had swallowed up the surrounding lands, and Hamill's hometown, once located at the border of Eurus, now belonged to the desert itself. Eurus was a relatively small nation and couldn't defend its borders, allowing the lands to become barren as the desert advanced. This expansion of the desert eventually became, in practice, a method of invasion. Only a fool would fail to realize that Nahama's sandstorms were artificial disasters caused by the country's sand mages. 300 years ago, during a time when monsters ran rampant and demons marched against humans, Nahama tried to use the chaos to invade the Kel Empire. Despite their attempt, they failed because of vermouth. Eugene had never liked Nahama, and his opinion hadn't changed even after 300 years. First, he decided to visit his tomb. He asked his companions to wait for him, as he would soon return to meet them. And that's how the first season of this story comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you want a second season, let us know in the comments. You can do it, so let's go.